The sound of metal against metal echoed through the Blue Star convenience store at midnight. Jack Sullivan stood motionless, listening to the ragged breathing of the unfamiliar woman behind the counter, while his daughter Emma's small hand trembled in his. The fluorescent lights flickered, illuminating the black SUV parked outside, where two shadowy figures waited. What should have been a simple late-night milk run for tomorrow's breakfast had suddenly transformed into an unwanted confrontation. The evening had started like any other Tuesday in suburban Silver Pine, Colorado. The Rocky Mountains loomed in the distance, their snow-capped peaks barely visible in the moonlight that streamed through the kitchen window of the Sullivan home. Jack Sullivan sat at the kitchen table of his modest two-bedroom ranch house, helping 8-year-old Emma with her math homework. The warm glow of the pendant light created a circle of concentration around her small frame as her pencil moved carefully across the worksheet. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, a habit that always reminded Jack of Catherine, his late wife. 7 times 8 is... Emma paused, her forehead crinkling as she counted silently on her fingers. Think about it like 7 times 4. Twice, Jack suggested gently, his calloused fingers pointing to the problem. Years of teaching Emma to approach challenges methodically had become second nature, whether those challenges involved multiplication tables or the more difficult lessons about life and loss they'd face together. At 48, Jack's weathered hands bore the marks of 2 distinct lives. 15 years in the Marine Corps had left calluses from weapons training and combat, while the last 3 years as the owner of Sullivan's Auto Repair had added fresh marks from wrenches and engine parts. His salt and pepper hair was still cut military short, and though his 6-foot frame carried more weight than during his service days, he remained strong and capable. The small but respected auto shop specialized in classic cars and off-road vehicles, earning the trust of local residents and fellow veterans alike. 56, Emma exclaimed triumphantly, writing down the answer with meticulous care. Her blue eyes, so much like her mother's, bright with accomplishment as she finished the last problem on the page. I finished, Dad. Can we have pancakes for breakfast tomorrow? Jack glanced at the nearly empty milk carton on the counter. They'd gone through their usual grocery routine on Sunday, but Emma's recent growth spurt had them consuming milk at an alarming rate. Only if we have milk, sweetheart, he said, already knowing what that meant. The refrigerator hummed in the background as Jack opened it, confirming what he already suspected. The milk carton contained barely enough for Emma's bedtime glass, let alone tomorrow's pancakes. He checked his watch, 11:15 p.m. The nearest grocery store closed at 10 o'clock p.m., but Blue Star, a 24/7 convenience store down on Maple Street, would be open. It wasn't the cleanest place in town, and the coffee always tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration, but it served its purpose for late-night emergencies. We need to make a quick milk run, Jack announced, closing the refrigerator door. Bedtime after that, kiddo. School tomorrow. Can I come with you? Emma asked, already sliding off her chair, anticipation brightening her features. Since Catherine's death 3 years ago in a car accident caused by a drunk driver, Emma had developed an attachment anxiety that made her reluctant to let Jack out of her sight, especially at night. The psychologist had explained it was normal, a fear response to the sudden loss of her mother. Jack had learned to balance reassurance with gentle encouragement toward independence. Jack considered the late hour against the anxiety he knew would plague Emma if left alone. The drive to Blue Star would take 5 minutes each way, plus a few minutes inside. He ran through the mental calculation he'd performed countless times since becoming a single parent, weighing immediate comfort against long-term resilience. Tonight, comfort won out. Okay, kiddo, grab your jacket. Quick trip. Emma's face lit up as she slid from her chair, hurrying to retrieve her purple jacket from the hook by the door. Jack gathered his keys and wallet, patting his back pocket out of habit to ensure his tactical folding knife was still there, a remnant of military habits he'd never managed to break, even in the peaceful streets of Silver Pine. The autumn air carried a crisp chill as they stepped outside. Jack's trusted Ford F-150 sat in the driveway, a vehicle chosen as much for its reliability as for the way its spacious cabin made him feel secure with Emma beside him. The truck had been Catherine's suggestion years ago, practical yet comforting, like so many of her ideas had been. He helped Emma into her booster seat, double-checking the straps before closing the door and circling around to the driver's side. The drive to Blue Star was quiet, the streets of Silver Pine nearly empty. Jack's truck hummed steadily as they passed darkened storefronts and residential streets. Emma clutched her favorite teddy bear, a well-worn companion that had seen her through the worst days after her mother's death. Its fur was matted in places, one eye slightly loose despite Jack's careful stitching. But to Emma, it remained perfect. "Dad, did Mom like pancakes?" Emma asked suddenly, her voice small in the truck's cabin. Jack's hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. These questions came less frequently now, but they never failed to create that familiar ache in his chest. Not quite the sharp pain of fresh grief, but a dull, persistent reminder of absence. She loved them. She used to add blueberries to the butter and make smiley faces with whipped cream for Yvonne. "I remember the faces," Emma said thoughtfully, "but I don't remember if she liked to eat them." "She did," Jack replied, swallowing hard. "She would steal bites from your plate and pretend it wasn't her. You'd laugh so hard, milk would come out your nose." Emma smiled at that, satisfied with maintaining this small connection to a mother she was gradually forgetting. Jack fought the wave of grief that still ambushed him at unexpected moments like these. Before Catherine's death, he'd been a different man, less cautious, more open to the world. Now his entire existence revolved around keeping Emma safe and preserving what remained of their fractured family. The Blue Star parking lot was nearly empty when they pulled in. The store's neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting an eerie blue glow across the asphalt. Only a black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows idled near the entrance, its engine running despite no one being visible inside. Jack's military instincts, honed through 2 tours in Afghanistan, registered the anomaly immediately. Why would someone leave a luxury SUV running unattended at this hour? "Stay close to me, Em," he said, helping her down from the truck. The cold night air carried the scent of exhaust fumes and the faint sweetness of antifreeze, unusual for a vehicle that appeared new and well-maintained. Another mental flag raised in Jack's mind as they approached the store entrance. The familiar bell chimed their arrival, and harsh fluorescent lighting made everything look stark and clinical after the darkness outside. The cold linoleum floor squeaked under their boots as they entered. Behind the counter stood a young woman Jack had never seen before. According to her name tag, she was Olivia. She appeared to be in her mid-20s with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her complexion pale under the unflattering lights. Something about her demeanor immediately triggered Jack's internal alarm system. Her movements were jerky and uncertain as she organized items behind the counter. She kept glancing toward the windows with an expression Jack recognized from his military days, the look of someone expecting trouble. Her hands trembled visibly as she arranged packets of cigarettes, nearly dropping several in the process. Her breathing pattern showed classic signs of fear, rapid, shallow breaths, with occasional attempts to control it through deeper inhalations. Jack's eyes scanned the store methodically, a habit from countless building clearances in hostile territory. The store was small, consisting of 6 short aisles stocked with overpriced groceries, automotive supplies, and household essentials. A coffee station occupied the far corner, the pot half full of what was likely hours-old brew. 2 security mirrors mounted in opposite corners revealed no other customers. The back wall held refrigerated units with drinks and dairy products, their destination. The rear exit was marked with a glowing sign, its push bar wrapped with a chain and padlock, a fire code violation that now represented a tactical problem. "I want to look at the candy, Dad," Emma said, tugging at his jacket and pointing toward the colorful display in aisle 3. Jack hesitated, his instincts screaming that something wasn't right. But the store was small, with clear sightlines down every aisle. "Okay, but stay where I can see you," he conceded, watching as she moved eagerly toward the candy section, still clutching her teddy bear. As Emma wandered off, Jack approached the counter, ostensibly to ask about the location of milk. He maintained a casual posture, but his eyes carefully scanned the store again, noting exits, potential weapons, and anything out of place. The metal napkin dispenser could serve as a blunt object. The shelf of motor oil provided a potential slipping hazard. The heavy flashlights on sale near the register could be used for striking. His tactical analysis was automatic, a habit ingrained by years of combat training. "Evening," he said to the young woman, keeping his voice friendly but neutral. You're new here? Olivia's eyes darted to him, then back to the window where the black SUV was visible. Just started last week, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands continued to tremble as she straightened items that didn't need straightening. Jack recognized the signs of someone under extreme stress. Dilated pupils, shallow breathing, micro-expressions of fear flashing across her face. This wasn't the normal anxiety of a new employee or even someone worried about a late-night robbery. This was the terror of someone who knew a specific threat was imminent. Everything okay? He asked quietly, positioning himself so his back wasn't to the door. The scanner slipped from Olivia's shaking fingers and clattered onto the counter. She looked up at Jack, with eyes drowning in fear, and whispered words that confirmed his suspicions. They've been following me for 3 days. Please call the police. Jack's body shifted imperceptibly into a state of heightened alertness, a condition his military instructors had called controlled combat readiness. His senses sharpened, adrenaline beginning to flow, but his outward appearance remained calm. He maintained his casual stance but mentally mapped every potential threat and resource in the immediate vicinity. He pulled out his phone discreetly, only to find no signal. The screen showed full battery but 0 bars, not even enough for an emergency call. Jammed, he muttered, recognizing the telltale signs of a signal blocker, technology he'd encountered in combat zones. Signal jammers operated by creating interference across specific radio frequencies, effectively creating a dead zone for cellular communications. This was professional-grade equipment, not something common criminals would deploy. Where's the store phone? Jack asked, his voice low and steady. Cut, Olivia whispered, a slight tremor in her voice. I tried it 10 minutes ago. Nothing. Who's following you? Jack pressed, his eyes scanning the parking lot through the store windows. The Escalade remained idling, its tinted windows revealing nothing of the occupants. Olivia's eyes flickered toward the SUV again. I'm a senior accountant for Cooper Industries, she whispered, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her uniform shirt. I found evidence of money laundering involving local government officials. Large-scale construction contracts, kickbacks, offshore accounts. I turned everything over to the FBI. Jack knew Cooper Industries well, a major real estate development company based in Denver, owned by Ryan Cooper, a former special forces operator who'd built an empire after leaving the service. Cooper had powerful connections throughout Colorado and was often photographed with politicians and business leaders. His company handled everything from luxury condos to government facilities, with contracts worth hundreds of millions. The federal trial starts Monday, Olivia continued, her voice trembling. I'm the key witness and the only one with documented evidence. If I don't testify, dangerous people walk free. She glanced at Emma, who was comparing candy bars, blissfully unaware of the tension crackling through the air. I'm sorry you and your daughter walked into this. Jack followed her gaze to Emma, his chest tightening at the sight of his daughter, happily oblivious to the danger surrounding them. In Afghanistan, he'd made split-second decisions that meant life or death for his team. Now, the stakes felt infinitely higher. Emma's safety hung in the balance. The bell above the door chimed softly, and Jack tensed, but it was just another customer, a middle-aged construction worker in a heavy jacket who nodded at Jack and headed straight for the coffee machine. The man moved with the measured pace of someone at the end of a long shift, his work boots caked with dried mud, his hands bearing the calluses and small scars of manual labor. The momentary distraction gave Jack precious seconds to process the situation. His phone was useless. The store's landline was cut. Emma was vulnerable, and this young woman appeared to be in genuine danger. Jack had sworn after Catherine's death that Emma's safety would always come first. His last words to his dying wife had been a promise to protect their daughter above all else. Yet walking away and leaving this young woman to face whatever waited for her in that SUV felt like abandoning everything he'd sworn to protect during his years of service. He watched Emma select a Snickers bar, her favorite, the wrapper crinkling in her small hands as she examined it. The smart play is to grab Emma, get in the truck, and call the police from somewhere else, he thought. But even as he considered this option, he knew the SUV could easily follow them, potentially creating a more dangerous situation on the road. A high-speed pursuit with Emma in the vehicle was unacceptable. He needed to make a decision that would keep both Emma and this woman safe. The construction worker paid for his coffee, adding an alarming amount of sugar with the focused intensity of someone who'd been working double shifts. As he approached the counter, he gave Jack a subtle nod, the kind of acknowledgement that passed between men who recognized something in each other. The man's calloused hands and the faded USMC tattoo on his forearm told Jack everything he needed to know. "Evening," the man said, his voice gruff but friendly. "You good here?" It was a loaded question, asked in the specific way veterans often checked on each other. Jack gave an imperceptible shake of his head as Olivia rang up the purchase. The construction worker, Mike Thompson according to the name stitched on his jacket, met Jack's eyes again as he collected his change. At 53, his face showed the weathering of a life spent working outdoors, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. "Weather's turning, you folks drive safe." With that, he left, the bell chiming his departure. Jack immediately began assessing their options, mentally cataloging everything in the store that could serve as a weapon or defensive tool. His tactical mind worked through various scenarios, calculating angles of approach, defensive positions, and potential escape routes. He focused on the items that could be repurposed as tools: motor oil and cleaning chemicals for creating slippery surfaces, the coffee pot as a throwing weapon, the heavy flashlight as a striking tool. His tactical knife in his boot, a habit he'd never abandoned after leaving the service, would be a last resort. Outside, one of the SUV's doors opened. "Emma," Jack called quietly. "Come here, sweetheart." She looked up, hearing the subtle change in his tone, a signal they'd developed after Catherine's death. It wasn't panic in his voice, but calm authority that told her this was important. "Is something wrong, Dad?" she asked, clutching her candy bar as she hurried to his side. Jack knelt to her level, keeping his back to the wall and his eyes on the entrance. "Remember our special hide-and-seek game?" he asked, referring to the safety drills they'd practiced at home, a precaution he'd implemented after losing Catherine. They'd practiced them regularly, turning potential life-saving actions into a game that wouldn't frighten her. Emma nodded solemnly. Despite being only 8, she showed a maturity beyond her years, a resilience inherited from both her parents that had helped her survive the trauma of losing her mother. Her blue eyes, so like Catherine's, held a wisdom that sometimes broke Jack's heart. "When I give the signal, I want you to hide behind the cereal display. Stay quiet and don't come out until I call our special word. Understand?" "Lighthouse," Emma whispered their code word, her eyes wide but trusting. Jack squeezed her shoulder gently. "That's right, you're so smart, just like your mom." The bell above the door chimed again, and Jack's head snapped toward the sound with reflexes honed by too many nights spent listening for footsteps that didn't belong. 2 men entered, both in their 40s, both carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of trained operatives. Jack recognized the physical tells immediately: the balanced stance, the controlled scanning of the environment, the subtle bulges of concealed weapons. The first man was broad-shouldered with a snake tattoo crawling up from his collar, visible even under his tactical jacket. His muscular build spoke of years of physical training, and the way he entered the space, claiming it, assessing threats, screamed military background. The second moved with predatory precision, his gray eyes scanning the store methodically, cold and emotionless. Slimmer than his companion but no less dangerous, he reminded Jack of the CIA operatives he'd occasionally worked with overseas, the kind who appeared unremarkable until the moment they weren't it. Jack recognized the type immediately: private military contractors, likely former special operations. Not common street thugs or hired muscle, but skilled professionals. This confirmed the seriousness of whatever Olivia had witnessed. "Get behind me," Jack whispered to Emma, who pressed herself against his back, still clutching her candy bar. He could feel her small body trembling, but she remained quiet, another lesson from their emergency drills. "Evening, Olivia," the tattooed man said, his voice carrying false warmth. "Time to go." Jack positioned himself strategically between the men and the counter, careful not to make any sudden movements that might escalate the situation. He gave Emma the hand signal they had practiced. 3 fingers tapped against his leg, and she immediately slipped away toward the cereal display, silent as a shadow. Jack had taught her well. Emergency drills had been a regular part of their lives since Catherine's death. "Gentlemen," Jack said, his voice steady, "store's about to close. You might want to make your purchases and head out." The second man's jacket shifted slightly, revealing the subtle bulge of a shoulder holster. "This doesn't concern you, friend. Just walk away." Jack's muscles coiled in preparation, his weight shifting subtly to the balls of his feet, center of gravity lowering. A combat stance as automatic as breathing. "Can't do that." The tattooed man narrowed his eyes, studying Jack more carefully. Recognition dawned slowly, spreading across his features like an oil stain. "Sullivan? Jack Sullivan?" Jack maintained his neutral expression, but inside his mind raced. The voice was familiar now that he heard it again. Maxwell Pierce, a former teammate from Delta Force. They'd served together during Operation Copper Shield in Afghanistan 10 years ago. The mission had been a high-risk hostage rescue that had gone sideways, resulting in the loss of 3 team members. "Max," Jack acknowledged cautiously, "didn't expect to see you here." "World's full of surprises," Maxwell replied, tension evident in his stance. "You're looking at one right now. Step aside, Jack. This isn't your fight." The second man, Garrett Davis, based on Maxwell's subtle nod toward him, seemed annoyed by this unexpected connection. His cold gray eyes showed no emotion, only calculation. At 35, he moved with the efficiency of someone thoroughly trained in close protection and elimination tactics, likely ex-CIA based on his bearing and methodology. "We don't have time for reunions, Pierce. We have a job," Garrett said, his voice clipped and professional. Jack kept his position, mind working through scenarios. Maxwell had been a solid operator once, one of the best in their unit, but rumors had circulated after Afghanistan that he'd gone private, working for PMCs with questionable ethics. The fact that he was here, threatening a federal witness, confirmed how far he'd fallen. "Whatever Cooper's paying you, it's not worth it," Jack said quietly. "This woman is under federal protection." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "She won't be if she doesn't make it to Monday. Last chance to walk away, Sullivan. We've got nothing against you or your kid." The mention of Emma sent a cold wave through Jack's system. These men knew he had his daughter with him, which meant they'd been watching the store when they arrived. The threat against Emma, however veiled, ignited something primal in Jack's chest. A protective rage he kept carefully controlled beneath his calm exterior. "I can't let you take her," Jack said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register that anyone who had served with him would recognize as a final warning. Maxwell's expression showed conflict, the first crack in his professional demeanor. "Jack, we've got 3 minutes before our backup starts wondering what's taking so long. Take your daughter and go. Forget what you saw here." Behind him, Jack could sense Olivia's fear, almost palpable in the air. She was clutching the counter so hard her knuckles had turned white. "You know I can't do that, Max," Jack replied. Garrett lost patience. "Enough talking." His hand moved toward his concealed weapon. That's when they all heard it, the tiny snap of a candy wrapper from behind the cereal display. Emma, trying to open her Snickers bar with trembling fingers, had made just enough noise to betray her position. Garrett's predatory instincts immediately shifted focus. He moved with frightening speed toward the cereal display, reaching it before Jack could intercept him. The man's training was evident in his fluid movement. No wasted energy, just lethal purpose. "Well, well," Garrett said, emerging with Emma firmly in his grip, her blue eyes wide with terror. "Looks like we have a bargaining chip." Jack felt ice flood his veins as Garrett positioned Emma between them, one arm around her small shoulders. His daughter's face reflected pure fear, but beneath it, Jack could see her struggling to remember their safety drills, to trust that her father would protect her. The teddy bear dangled from her fingers, nearly forgotten in her terror. "Let her go, Davis," Jack said, his voice deadly calm. "She's innocent." "Put your hands where I can see them, Sullivan," Garrett demanded, "or your daughter becomes completely orphaned tonight." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Emma's frightened face. Jack raised his hands slowly, every fiber of his being focused on his daughter's safety. He'd faced down insurgents, survived firefights, and defused bombs, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer terror of seeing his child in danger. Maxwell's posture had changed. tension visible in his shoulders as he watched Garrett use a child as leverage. "Davis, this wasn't part of the plan," he muttered. "Plans change," Garrett replied coldly. "Get the accountant. I'll handle Sullivan and the kid." As Maxwell moved toward Olivia, Jack's mind raced through combat scenarios, weighing risks against outcomes with the precision that had kept him alive through 2 tours. Every option ended with Emma in danger unless he timed his move perfectly. He needed to create an opening, a moment of distraction that would allow him to neutralize the threat without endangering his daughter. "I remember you now, Sullivan," Maxwell said, his voice oddly reflective as he approached the counter. "Operation Copper Shield, Kandahar. You saved those hostages when everyone said it was a suicide mission." Jack kept his eyes on Emma, trying to project calm reassurance. "That was a lifetime ago, Max." "3 of our team died that day," Maxwell continued, almost as if thinking aloud. "Johnson took that RPG meant for you. Williams bled out under your hands. And Torres bombed. He never made it out of that compound." "I remember every one of them," Jack said quietly. The memories were still vivid. The dust, the heat, the metallic smell of blood, the weight of Williams as Jack tried desperately to staunch the bleeding from a severed femoral artery. The way Torres had looked at him in those final moments, asking Jack to tell his wife and daughters that he loved them. The nightmares had faded over time, but never completely disappeared. Maxwell nodded, a strange respect in his eyes, despite the circumstances. "You were always the best of us, Sullivan. The moral compass. What happened to you after you got out?" "Life," Jack answered simply. "Marriage. A daughter. Then a drunk driver took my wife 3 years ago." Something shifted in Maxwell's expression, a flicker of shared understanding. "I got out after that last tour, PTSD, nightmares, they didn't want to know. Wife left, took my daughter. Haven't seen Sophia in 3 years." The mention of his daughter caused a subtle shift in Maxwell's demeanor, a softening around the eyes, a momentary vulnerability. Jack filed this information away, sensing a potential leverage point if things escalated further. Garrett interrupted impatiently, "Touching reunion. Now grab the accountant so we can finish this." Emma's eyes found Jack's, wide with fear but trusting him completely. Jack gave her the subtle nod they'd practiced, their signal that everything would be okay, that he had a plan. He saw her almost imperceptibly relax, her small shoulders dropping just a fraction. Even in her terror, she trusted him. The convenience store's air conditioner kicked on with a mechanical groan, momentarily distracting Garrett. It was the opening Jack had been waiting for. He dropped instantly into a fighting stance, muscles coiled like springs. "Emma, down," he commanded. With the instinctive response of a child who had practiced emergency drills, Emma went limp in Garrett's grip, suddenly becoming dead weight. Simultaneously, Jack launched himself forward, a lifetime of training compressed into pure kinetic energy. His shoulder connected with Garrett's sternum before the man could adjust his grip on Emma. The impact lifted Garrett off his feet and sent him crashing into a display of chips. Emma scrambled free, darting behind a shelf as Jack had taught her. Maxwell hesitated, caught between his mission and the unexpected turn of events. That split second of indecision was all Olivia needed. She grabbed the coffee pot and hurled the scalding liquid at Maxwell's face. The convenience store erupted into chaos. Garrett recovered quickly, his training evident as he regained his footing and reached for his weapon. Jack knew he couldn't allow him to draw. He closed the distance, employing the close-quarters combat techniques that had become second nature during his military career. Jack struck with precision, targeting Garrett's weapon arm with a combination of strikes designed to temporarily disable the limb's motor function. He leveraged his weight into each blow, aiming for nerve clusters and pressure points that would cause maximum effect with minimal force. Garrett countered with a knife that appeared in his left hand, slashing upward and catching Jack across his right shoulder. Pain blazed through Jack's arm, but adrenaline pushed it to the background. Blood warmed his skin beneath his jacket, but the wound wasn't deep enough to impede his movement. Not yet, anyway. He absorbed the momentum of Garrett's attack, redirecting it to throw the man off balance. Years of martial arts training merged with the combat experience as Jack maintained control of the engagement's tempo. Maxwell finally made his decision, moving to restrain Olivia. But his movements lacked conviction, his eyes constantly darting to where Emma had hidden. The conflict on his face was evident. This wasn't the mission he'd signed up for. Jack found himself fighting with one eye on Emma's position, making sure neither assailant moved toward her. His protective instinct narrowed his world to one simple objective: keep these men away from his daughter. Every strike, every block, every movement was calculated to maintain the position between the threats and Emma's hiding place. Garrett proved to be exceptionally skilled, matching Jack's techniques with counters of his own. A vicious elbow strike caught Jack in the ribs, sending a spike of pain through his side. Jack felt the distinct give of a cracked rib, but pushed through the pain, refusing to yield. The fight escalated as they crashed into shelving units, sending merchandise flying. Glass bottles shattered on the floor, creating a hazardous battlefield of broken shards and spilled liquids. "Dad!" Emma cried out as she saw Jack take a hard hit. The sound of his daughter's fear triggered something primal in Jack. He pushed through the pain, finding reserves of strength that only fatherhood could unlock. With renewed focus, he systematically dismantled Garrett's defenses, exploiting the man's tendency to favor his right side. Jack was no longer the polished special operator he'd once been. Years of civilian life had softened him somewhat, but the core skills remained, hardwired into his muscle memory. Every strike was deliberate, every defensive move calculated. He fought not with the cold precision of a soldier, but with the desperate determination of a father protecting his child. A decisive strike to Garrett's solar plexus doubled the man over, followed by a knee to the face that sent him sprawling unconscious across the linoleum floor. Jack stood over him for a moment, breathing heavily, sweat mingling with blood from the cut on his shoulder. Jack turned immediately to find Maxwell holding Olivia with one arm, his expression conflicted as he watched the fight's conclusion. Maxwell's grip wasn't as tight as it should have been, another sign of his internal struggle. "Let her go, Max," Jack said, breathing heavily, blood seeping from the cut on his shoulder. "It's over." Maxwell's eyes moved to where Emma peered out from behind the shelf, her small face streaked with tears, but showing remarkable composure for an 8-year-old. "She has your eyes," Maxwell said quietly, but her mother's expression. "Don't do this," Jack urged. "You're better than this." Maxwell's grip on Olivia loosened slightly. "Am I? I don't even recognize myself anymore, Sullivan. After Sophia was taken away, I just needed the money. Private military work was all I knew." Jack took a cautious step forward. It's not too late to make a different choice. Emma emerged from her hiding place, clutching her teddy bear tightly. Despite the danger, despite everything she'd witnessed, she moved toward them with the inexplicable courage of childhood. "Is your little girl okay?" she asked Maxwell, her voice small but steady. The simple question from a child struck Maxwell like a physical blow. Jack watched as the hardened exterior of the mercenary cracked, revealing the broken father beneath. Maxwell's arm fell away from Olivia, who immediately scrambled toward Jack. "I don't know," Maxwell answered honestly, looking at Emma with something akin to wonder. "I haven't seen her in 3 years. She'd be about your age now, 9. Emma nodded solemnly. "My mom died 3 years ago. I miss her every day." Maxwell's professional demeanor crumbled entirely in the face of this child's raw honesty. He sank to one knee, his weapon forgotten at his side. "I'm sorry about your mom, kid." Behind them, Garrett began to stir, groaning as he regained consciousness. The moment of connection was shattered as reality reasserted itself. "We've got problems," Maxwell said, suddenly alert again. "There are 2 more men in the SUV and Garrett has a backup piece in his boot." As if on cue, Garrett's hand moved toward his ankle. Maxwell reacted instantly, launching himself at his former partner. "Not the kid, Davis!" he shouted as they collided. The sudden betrayal caught Garrett off guard. The 2 men grappled on the floor, a lethal struggle between professionals who knew exactly how to kill. Their movements were efficient and brutal, each seeking the advantage that would end the fight. "Dad!" Emma cried as a gunshot echoed through the store. The sound was deafening in the confined space, leaving a ringing aftermath that seemed to suspend time itself. Maxwell rolled away from Garrett, blood spreading across his chest from a point-blank wound. Despite the injury, he managed to kick Garrett's gun away, sending it skittering under a display rack. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth as he gasped for breath. "I've lost too much humanity already," Maxwell gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. But not this. Not a child, Davis. Jack pulled Emma behind him and back toward the counter where Olivia stood frozen in shock. We need to move, he said urgently. Those shots will bring his back up. Garrett struggled to his feet, blood streaming from a head wound where Jack had struck him earlier. His eyes burned with cold fury as he reached for a secondary weapon. You're dead, Pierce, he snarled at Maxwell, who lay gasping on the floor. And so is everyone else in this store. Maxwell's laugh was wet with blood. Always were a predictable son of a bitch, Davis. He looked at Jack. Get them out of here, Sullivan. I'll buy you time. Jack assessed the situation rapidly. Maxwell was critically wounded but still dangerous. Garrett was armed again, and two more threats waited outside. The odds were worsening by the second. Emma, Jack said firmly, remember what we practiced at home? We're going to use those skills now. Emma nodded, fear in her eyes, but determination in her small jaw. Catherine's determination that had always made Jack proud. Even in this moment of crisis, Jack couldn't help but see his late wife and their daughter. The same stubborn courage, the same unwillingness to yield to fear. Garrett raised his weapon, but Maxwell launched himself from the floor in a last desperate attack, crashing into the man's legs. Both went down again in a tangle of limbs and curses. Blood smeared across the linoleum as they struggled, Maxwell's strength fading but his resolve unbroken. Go! Maxwell shouted through gritted teeth as he grappled with Garrett. Rear exit, now! Jack didn't hesitate. He scooped Emma into his arms and grabbed Olivia's wrist, pulling her toward the store's back exit. As they reached the door, another gunshot rang out behind them. Jack resisted the urge to look back, focusing instead on the exit and the next phase of their escape. Jack glanced back to see Maxwell lying motionless, a second wound in his torso. Garrett was already struggling to his feet, radioing for backup. Targets fleeing out the back, need immediate containment. We have 3 minutes tops before this place is swarming with Cooper's men, Jack told Olivia, as they burst through the rear exit into the cold Colorado night. The mountain air bit at their faces, a stark contrast to the overheated interior of the store. They raced toward Jack's truck, Emma clinging to his neck. Her small body trembled against him, but she remained silent, understanding instinctively that noise could betray them. As he fumbled for his keys, the convenience store's front door slammed open. Garrett emerged, weapon raised, scanning the parking lot. Jack ducked behind a dumpster, holding Emma close as he strategized their next move. The truck was 20 yards away, exposed under the parking lot lights. Garrett would spot them instantly if they made a break for it. What do we do now, Dad? Emma whispered, her voice trembling but brave. Jack looked down at his daughter's trusting face, then at Olivia's terrified one. He thought of Maxwell, who had made the ultimate sacrifice to protect a child he didn't even know, perhaps seeking redemption for the daughter he'd lost. For all his faults, Maxwell had found a line he wouldn't cross. In his final moments, he'd rediscovered his humanity. In that moment, Jack Sullivan made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes protecting what matters most means taking the fight to those who threaten it. He couldn't run, he couldn't hide. He had to end this now for Emma's sake. Now, he told them both with quiet certainty, we fight back. The night air stung Jack's lungs as he assessed their situation. Behind the dumpster, Emma's breathing came in quick, frightened gasps, while Olivia's eyes darted frantically between the convenience store's back door and the surrounding darkness. The parking lot's security lights cast long shadows across the asphalt, providing minimal cover but making movement easily detectable. In the distance, the familiar silhouette of Jack's F-150 sat tantalizingly close yet impossibly far, given their exposed position. They'll expect us to run for the truck, Jack whispered, his tactical mind rapidly sorting through options. That's exactly why we won't. He peered around the edge of the dumpster. Through the store's windows, he could see Garrett barking orders into a radio while checking Maxwell's motionless form for a pulse. The man's movements were methodical even in crisis, the mark of a professional. Jack's mind flashed to Maxwell's final moments, the unexpected sacrifice from a man who'd chosen the wrong path but found redemption at the end. There would be time to process that later. Right now, survival demanded his full attention. Olivia, Jack said quietly, exactly how many people are working with Cooper? At least 4 men tonight, she whispered. But his security team has over a dozen ex-military contractors. They're well-equipped and well-trained. Some former Delta Force like you, others from various special operations backgrounds. Cooper only hires the best. Jack nodded, the information confirming his suspicions. Cooper's resources were substantial, not just financially, but in terms of skilled personnel. This wasn't a simple threat, but a coordinated operation by professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. Their training would make them formidable, but also predictable to someone who shared their background. Emma, remember when we went camping last summer? How we had to be really quiet to see the deer? Jack asked, turning to his daughter. Emma's eyes widened with understanding. She nodded solemnly, her small hand clutching her teddy bear tighter. The camping trip had been their first real vacation after Catherine's death. A weekend in the mountains where Jack had taught Emma about wildlife tracking and moving silently through the forest. What had been intended as father-daughter bonding now served a far more critical purpose. Just like that now, okay? Silent steps, Jack instructed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Despite the danger, he allowed himself a brief moment to marvel at her composure. 8 years old and already showing the kind of courage that would make any father proud. Catherine would have been amazed to see how their daughter had inherited her quiet strength and determination. There's a service alley behind that fence, Jack continued, pointing to a wooden barrier at the edge of the property. We're going to move along the tree line, stay in the shadows, and make our way around the building. No straight lines. Olivia looked skeptical. What about your truck? Shouldn't we try to drive away? They've had plenty of time to sabotage it, Jack explained, and even if they haven't, we'd be completely exposed crossing the lot. Better to disappear and regroup. He didn't mention his other concern, that Cooper's men might have planted a tracking device on the vehicle. The truck would have to be abandoned, at least temporarily. A sudden commotion from inside the store indicated Garrett was on the move. Jack peered around the dumpster again to see the man emerging from the front entrance, weapon drawn, with 2 new figures flanking him, reinforcements from the SUV. Their coordinated movements confirmed Jack's assessment. These weren't ordinary thugs, but trained operatives with tactical experience. They moved with the disciplined precision that came from years of combat operations, spreading out to establish a search perimeter, just as Jack would have done in their position. Now, Jack whispered, follow me exactly. Stay low, move only when I move. He took Emma's hand and gestured for Olivia to stay close. In a crouched position, they slipped from behind the dumpster and into the deeper shadows near the building's edge. Jack moved with the practiced silence of someone who had conducted night operations in hostile territory, each step carefully placed to avoid making sound. Emma mimicked his movements perfectly, her small feet finding silent purchase where he led. Olivia struggled more, her civilian inexperience showing in occasional missteps, but she adapted quickly, her survival instinct overcoming her fear. They reached the wooden fence as voices carried across the parking lot. Garrett was organizing a search pattern, dividing the area into sectors. Sullivan's military, Jack heard him say. He'll use tactical movement and seek cover. Expand the search radius to 3 blocks. Check all residences with lights on, and find me information on his home address. Soon, flashlight beams began sweeping methodically across the property, moving in a grid pattern that would eventually cover every inch of the surrounding area. Time was running out. Through here, Jack whispered, pointing to a gap where one of the fence boards had partially broken away. Emma first, then you, Olivia. Emma slipped through the narrow opening with the agility only a child possesses. Olivia followed with more difficulty, wincing as splinters caught at her uniform. Jack came last, his broader shoulders barely squeezing through the gap. A nail tore at his jacket, leaving a jagged rip. But he emerged on the other side, just as a flashlight beam swept past their previous position. The service alley behind the fence was littered with discarded pallets and overflowing dumpsters from neighboring businesses. The uneven ground was treacherous in the darkness, but it offered concealment as they moved away from the Blue Star. The cold night air carried the scent of garbage and wet cardboard, masking their own scent. A tactical advantage Jack noted automatically. Where are we going? Olivia whispered, stumbling over an unseen obstacle. First priority is distance, Jack replied, steadying her with one hand while keeping Emma close with the other. We need to contact the authorities, But we can't use any obvious methods. They'll be monitoring police frequencies and cell towers. Emma tugged at his jacket. Dad, what about Mr. Mike? The man with the coffee. He knew something was wrong. Jack paused, considering. The construction worker with the marine tattoo. Good thinking, Em. He remembered the subtle acknowledgement between them, the unspoken understanding that had passed between two veterans recognizing a situation going sideways. He might have called for help already. Is he a friend of yours? Olivia asked. Never met him before tonight, Jack admitted. But there's a code among veterans. He recognized trouble when he saw it. Jack had seen it countless times during his service. The way former military personnel could communicate volumes with just a glance, especially in potentially dangerous situations. Mike Thompson had clearly read the room correctly and made his exit, hopefully to summon help rather than simply avoid trouble. They continued down the alley until it intersected with a residential street. The suburban neighborhood was quiet at this hour, most windows dark except for the occasional porch light or second-story bedroom. Jack guided them toward a small playground nestled between houses, its equipment casting strange, elongated shadows under the streetlights. A swing set creaked softly in the night breeze, the sound eerily reminiscent of the Blue Star's door chime, a comparison that sent an involuntary shiver down Jack's spine. We'll rest here for a minute, Jack decided, guiding them beneath a covered slide structure where they would be hidden from the street. I need to check something. He knelt beside Emma, examining her for any injuries. Finding none, he turned his attention to Olivia, who was trembling from both fear and the night's chill. Her Blue Star uniform offered little protection against the cold Colorado night, and shock was beginning to set in. Her face was pale in the dim light, her eyes wide but focused, still processing the violence she'd witnessed, but holding herself together through sheer determination. Are you hurt? He asked quietly. She shook her head. Just scared. Those men, they'll keep coming, won't they? Yes, Jack answered honestly, seeing no point in false reassurances. Cooper has too much to lose if you testify, but we have an advantage now. What's that? Olivia asked skeptically. They've lost the element of surprise. Jack began checking his own injuries. The knife wound on his shoulder had mostly stopped bleeding, but his ribs protested with sharp pain when he moved. Definitely cracked, possibly broken. He'd fought through worse in Kandahar after an IED had flipped their Humvee. At least this time he didn't have to carry a wounded teammate through a hostile village while under sniper fire. The memory of that night, the weight of Corporal Martinez on his shoulders, the metallic taste of fear, the desperate rush to the extraction point flashed through his mind before he pushed it away, focusing on the present danger. Emma watched him with worried eyes. You're hurt, Dad. Just a scratch, kiddo, he assured her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Nothing that won't heal. You need a doctor, Olivia insisted, noticing the bloodstain on his jacket. What I need is a secure phone and a safe place for Emma, Jack countered. He glanced at his watch. 12:40 a.m. The night stretched before them, full of danger and uncertainty. Cooper's men will establish a search perimeter, he explained, falling back on his military training. They'll focus on transportation hubs, hotels, police stations, anywhere we might logically go for help. He mentally mapped the likely search grid, calculating how quickly they could cover ground and which areas they would prioritize. They'll check my house first, then branch out to friends, colleagues, anywhere associated with me. So where do we go? Olivia asked. Jack considered their options. His home would be the first place they'd look. Police stations would be monitored. Hospitals required identification and asked too many questions. They needed somewhere unexpected, somewhere that wouldn't appear on any logical checklist of places associated with Jack Sullivan. Dad, can we go to Ms. Eleanor's? Emma suggested quietly. Jack looked at his daughter in surprise. Eleanor Winters? Emma nodded. She always says I can come over anytime. Even at night, she told me that after Mom died. Jack considered the suggestion. Eleanor Winters was their 80-year-old neighbor, a retired high school principal who had taken a special interest in Emma after Catherine's death. She lived alone in a modest house 3 blocks from the playground, with a son who visited weekly but otherwise maintained her independence with fierce determination. The kind of woman who still used a rotary phone and kept her late husband's shotgun in the hall closet just in case. Her home was a frequent sanctuary for Emma, who often spent afternoons there after school when Jack worked late at the shop. What made Eleanor perfect wasn't just her fondness for Emma, but her complete disconnection from Jack's military past or Olivia's situation. She was exactly the kind of ally they needed, someone with no obvious connection that Cooper's men would identify, but with enough life experience and practical wisdom to understand the gravity of the situation. Good thinking, Em, Jack said, his chest swelling with pride at his daughter's resourcefulness. Ms. Eleanor it is. They left the playground, sticking to the shadows between streetlights. Jack kept them moving in an indirect route, doubling back occasionally to ensure they weren't being followed. His instincts told him they'd successfully broken contact for now, but Cooper's men would widen their search pattern soon. They had perhaps a 30-minute window before the neighborhood would be at risk. Emma's small hand remained firmly in his, her steps increasingly heavy as exhaustion began to take its toll. The adrenaline that had kept her going was fading, replaced by the bone-deep weariness that followed extreme stress. Olivia stayed close, her initial panic having settled into a grim determination. Jack admired her resilience. Many civilians would have collapsed under the pressures by now, but she maintained her composure, adapting to their cautious pace despite her obvious fatigue. "How did you get involved with Cooper Industries?" Jack asked quietly as they moved through a particularly dark stretch between houses. Olivia hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was headhunted from my previous accounting firm. The salary was twice what I was making, and the benefits package was incredible. It seemed like my big break." A bitter smile crossed her face. "For the first year, everything was perfect. I was handling major accounts, earning bonuses, living the dream. Then I noticed discrepancies in the government contract ledgers." "And you investigated?" Jack prompted. "I thought it was just an accounting error at first," Olivia continued, "but the numbers kept adding up wrong, and the documentation had inconsistencies. When I brought it to my supervisor's attention, he told me to ignore it, said it was being handled at a higher level." "But you didn't let it go," Jack surmised. Olivia shook her head. "I couldn't. The more I looked, the worse it got. Money being funneled through shell companies, kickbacks to government officials, forged documentation. It was systematic corruption on a massive scale." "So you went to the FBI," Jack concluded. "Not immediately," Olivia admitted. "I was scared. Cooper has a reputation for being ruthless in business. But when I found evidence that the deputy mayor was involved, I knew I had to do something. This wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. It was corrupting our entire city government." Jack nodded, respecting her courage. Whistleblowers often face severe repercussions, both professional and personal. Olivia had known the risks, but chosen to act anyway, a decision that reflected a strong moral compass. Eleanor's house appeared ahead, a small craftsman with a well-tended garden and a porch light that remained on all night, a habit from her childhood in rural Montana, she'd once explained to Jack. The property was surrounded by mature trees that provided additional privacy from the street. A single light glowed from what Jack knew to be the kitchen window, suggesting Eleanor was still awake despite the late hour. "Wait here," Jack instructed, positioning Olivia and Emma behind a large oak tree in the adjoining yard. "I'll make sure it's safe." He approached the house cautiously, staying low and checking for any signs of surveillance. Finding none, he made his way to the back door rather than the front, knowing Eleanor's bedroom was at the rear of the house. He tapped gently on the window, not wanting to frighten the elderly woman, but needing to wake her. After a moment, a light flickered on inside. The curtain moved slightly as Eleanor peered out. Upon recognizing Jack, she immediately opened the door, her expression concerned but not afraid. At 80, Eleanor Winters remained sharp-minded and remarkably self-possessed, her silver hair neatly braided for sleep, her posture still carrying the authority of her decades as an educator. Jack had always thought she looked like she should be wielding a ruler rather than a teacup, though he discovered she was equally proficient with both. "Jack Sullivan," she said, taking in his disheveled appearance and the bloodstain on his jacket. "This isn't a social call at 1 in the morning." "No, ma'am," Jack replied with the respect he'd always shown her. "Emma and I need help, and we've brought someone who needs protection." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "Are you in trouble with the law?" "No, ma'am, just the opposite. We're trying to protect a witness." Eleanor considered this for exactly 3 seconds before nodding decisively. Bring them in through the back. I'll put on some tea. Jack retrieved Emma and Olivia from their hiding place, guiding them quickly into Eleanor's warm kitchen. The space was exactly as Jack remembered from previous visits, immaculately clean, furnished with antiques that had been well maintained for decades. Walls decorated with photographs of Eleanor's late husband, her son, and various grandchildren. The subtle scent of cinnamon and cloves hung in the air, comfortingly familiar. The elderly woman took one look at Emma's exhausted face and Olivia's frightened expression and immediately went into action, her movements economical and purposeful. Emma, dear, you know where the guest room is. Take this young lady with you and find her something warm to change into from my granddaughter's closet, Eleanor directed. Jack, sit down before you fall down. That shoulder needs tending. As Olivia and Emma disappeared down the hallway, Eleanor turned to Jack with a penetrating gaze that had intimidated generations of students. Now tell me everything. Jack gave her the condensed version. Olivia's witness status, Cooper's hired guns, the confrontation at the Blue Star, and Maxwell's unexpected sacrifice. Eleanor listened without interruption, only the tightening of her lips indicating her reaction. Her hands remained steady as she prepared a pot of Earl Grey, the familiar ritual at odds with the extraordinary circumstances. I need to make some calls, Jack concluded, but using my phone would lead them straight to us. Use my landline, Eleanor said, gesturing to an old rotary phone on the wall. No one's traced a rotary call since the Cold War. Jack smiled despite the circumstances. Eleanor's practicality was exactly what they needed. I need to reach the FBI field office in Denver. Olivia's their witness. Make your call, Eleanor said, rising from the table. I'll check on the girls and get my first aid kit. That shoulder won't clean itself. Jack dialed the FBI field office, knowing the call would be routed to the on-duty agent. After identifying himself and explaining the situation, he was connected to Special Agent Diana Chen, the lead investigator on the Cooper Industries case. Mr. Sullivan, Agent Chen's voice was crisp and professional, even at this hour. We've been trying to reach Ms. Reed for the past 2 hours. Her protective detail reported her missing from her designated safe house. She's with me, Jack confirmed. There was an incident at the Blue Star convenience store on Maple. 2 of Cooper's men attempted to abduct her. There's at least one casualty, a man named Maxwell Pierce, former military. And you intervened? Agent Chen's tone was skeptical. My daughter and I were in the wrong place at the wrong time, Jack explained. I couldn't walk away. There was a pause as Agent Chen processed this information. Our agents are en route to the convenience store now. We'll need your location to bring Miss Reed in. Jack hesitated. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something didn't feel right. How did Cooper's men know where to find her in the first place? She was supposed to be under federal protection. The silence on the other end stretched a beat too long. We're investigating that breach, Agent Chen finally replied. But right now, our priority is securing our witness. Someone in your office is compromised, Jack stated flatly. We'll come in, but on my terms. I'll call back in 2 hours with a meeting location of my choosing. Mr. Sullivan, I strongly advise 2 hours, Jack repeated, then hung up. He turned to find Eleanor standing in the doorway, first aid kit in hand, her expression unreadable. Trust issues? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Healthy skepticism, Jack corrected. Cooper has the kind of money and connections that can compromise even federal agencies. Until I know who Olivia can trust, we play it safe. Eleanor nodded, gesturing for him to remove his jacket. Shirt too. Let's see what we're dealing with. Jack complied, wincing as the movement pulled at his injured ribs. The knife wound on his shoulder was shallow but ragged, cutting across his deltoid muscle. Eleanor cleaned it efficiently with antiseptic, her hands steady despite her age. She worked with the precision of someone who had dressed many wounds over the years, a skill Jack suspected she'd acquired growing up on a Montana ranch long before she'd become an educator. Should have stitches, she commented, but butterfly bandages will have to do. As she worked, Jack explained his concerns about potential leaks within the FBI. Cooper's been building his empire for years. He's got connections in local government, law enforcement, possibly federal agencies. We need to be careful who we trust. Eleanor applied the final bandage with a firm pat. In my 80 years, I've learned that power and money corrupt in equal measure. Your caution is warranted. She handed him a clean t-shirt from her late husband's drawer. Now, what's your plan? Jack pulled on the shirt carefully. We need somewhere public enough to deter violence, but controlled enough to spot surveillance. Somewhere we can control the approaches and exits. The old train station downtown, Eleanor suggested. It's being renovated, but the main hall is still used for community events. Multiple exits, good sight lines, and enough people during the day to provide witnesses. Jack nodded appreciatively. That could work. We'd need to get there early, scope it out. My son David is a contractor for the renovation, Eleanor added. He has keys to the service areas. I can call him, he's discreet. Before Jack could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway, now dressed in pajamas that were slightly too large for her. Her face was cleaner, but exhaustion shadowed her eyes. She clutched her teddy bear, the stuffed animal that had been her constant companion since Catherine's death. Jack had offered to replace it many times as it became increasingly worn, but Emma refused. It was one of the last gifts her mother had given her. Dad? Her voice trembled slightly. Are the bad men going to find us here? Jack opened his arms, and Emma rushed into them, burying her face against his chest. He held her close, careful of his injured ribs. No, sweetheart, we're safe here with Ms. Eleanor. I'm scared, Emma whispered. That man hurt Mr. Maxwell. He wanted to hurt you too. Jack stroked her hair gently. I know it's scary, but do you remember what Mom used to say about being brave? Emma nodded against his chest. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right even when you are afraid. That's right, Jack affirmed. And right now, the brave thing is to rest. We've got a lot to do tomorrow. Eleanor approached, resting a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. I've made up the guest room for you, dear. There's warm milk with honey on the nightstand, just the way you like it. Emma looked up at Jack, reluctant to leave him. Will you come tuck me in? Of course, Jack promised. Go on ahead. I'll be there in a minute. As Emma padded down the hallway, Jack turned to Eleanor. Thank you for this. I know it's putting you at risk. Eleanor waved away his concern. At my age, a little risk is invigorating. Besides, that child has suffered enough loss. I won't see her lose you too. Her expression softened. Catherine would be proud of you, Jack. The way you've raised Emma, how you protect her, it's what Catherine would have wanted. The mention of his late wife sent a familiar pang through Jack's chest, but it was tempered by the warmth of Eleanor's words. I hope so, he said quietly. After tucking Emma in and assuring her that he would be nearby all night, Jack returned to the kitchen to find Olivia and Eleanor deep in conversation. Olivia had changed into borrowed clothes, jeans and a sweater that must have belonged to Eleanor's granddaughter. Her Blue Star uniform discarded. With her hair down and the cashier's outfit gone, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but there was a steely determination in her eyes that Jack recognized. It was the look of someone who had made a difficult choice and was prepared to see it through, regardless of the consequences. How are you holding up? Jack asked, taking a seat across from her. Better now that we have a plan, Olivia replied. Eleanor explained about the train station. She hesitated, then continued. But I'm worried about Cooper. He doesn't give up, and he has resources we can't match. Tell me more about what you found, Jack said. The more I understand, the better I can anticipate his moves. Olivia's expression hardened with resolve. It started with discrepancies in the accounting for a government contract, a new courthouse in Denver. The numbers didn't add up, so I started digging. What I found was a sophisticated money laundering operation using construction projects as fronts. Cooper was inflating costs, taking kickbacks, and funneling money through shell companies. And local officials were involved? Jack prompted. 3 council members, a judge, and the deputy mayor, Olivia confirmed, all on Cooper's payroll. When I realized the scope, I went straight to the FBI. They've been building their case for months, gathering evidence to ensure the charges stick. The trial starts Monday, Jack remembered. No wonder Cooper's desperate. If his operation is exposed, he loses everything. Not just his business, Olivia added. We're talking about potential RICO charges, decades in prison. He's fighting for his freedom. Jack nodded, the picture becoming clear. A desperate man with resources was the most dangerous kind of adversary. It explained the level of force Cooper was willing to deploy, the risks he was taking. This wasn't just about silencing a witness, it was about survival. Did you work directly with Agent Chen? Jack asked. Yes, she's been my primary contact, Olivia confirmed. She seemed trustworthy, professional. Maybe she is, Jack conceded. But someone gave up your location, and until we know who, we treat everyone with caution. Eleanor, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. You both need rest. The guest room is prepared for Olivia. Jack, you can take the sofa in my study. It's comfortable enough and positioned to see both the front and back entrances. Jack nodded gratefully. I'll take first watch. We should rotate through the night, just to be safe. Nonsense, Eleanor countered. I'll take the first watch. I sleep less than 4 hours a night at my age anyway. I've got my late husband's shotgun in the closet, and I still remember how to use it. Jack raised an eyebrow, and Eleanor smiled thinly. Montana farm girl, remember? I was shooting prairie dogs before you were born, young man. Despite everything, Jack found himself smiling. Yes, ma'am. As Olivia excused herself to get some rest, Jack conducted a final security check of the property, ensuring all entrances were secured and identifying potential egress routes in case of emergency. The house was well built, with solid doors and windows that locked securely. Eleanor had maintained it meticulously over the decades, another trait Jack respected about her. She understood that care and attention to detail mattered, whether in education or home maintenance. Satisfied, he returned to Eleanor's study, where she had prepared the sofa with sheets and a pillow. The room was lined with bookshelves filled with volumes on history, education, and classic literature. A photograph on the desk caught his eye, a much younger Eleanor standing beside a tall, broad-shouldered man in a Korean War uniform. Her late husband, Jack presumed. They were smiling, their posture suggesting a deep connection despite the formal nature of the photograph. Get some sleep, Jack, Eleanor urged from the doorway. You've done all you can for tonight. Exhaustion washed over him as he stretched out on the sofa, his injured ribs protesting. Despite his training to function on minimal rest, the events of the night had taken their toll. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard, making his limbs feel leaden. His last thought before drifting into a light, vigilant sleep was of Emma, and the promise he'd made to Catherine to keep their daughter safe, no matter what. The nightmare came as it always did, fragments of memory distorted by grief and guilt. Catherine's voice on the phone, telling him she was on her way home. The police at the door 3 hours later. The drunk driver who'd crossed the center line had survived. Catherine had not. In the dream, Jack was always running toward the crash site, but never reaching it, his legs moving as if through deep water. Catherine's voice calling for him, growing fainter as he struggled to reach her. And then the silence, absolute and devastating. He awoke with a start, his body tensing for combat before he remembered where he was. Eleanor's study was bathed in the gray light of early morning. His watch showed 5:43 a.m. He'd slept longer than intended, though his body still ached with fatigue. The pain in his ribs had settled into a dull throb, manageable but persistent. The shoulder wound stung when he moved, but Eleanor's careful treatment had prevented infection. Moving carefully to avoid aggravating his injuries, Jack rose and made his way to the kitchen, where he found Eleanor already awake, preparing coffee. She acknowledged him with a nod, her silver hair now neatly arranged in its usual bun, her clothing simple but impeccable, a reminder that some routines persisted regardless of circumstances. All quiet through the night, she reported. David called back. He'll meet us at the train station at 8 with the keys. Thank you, Jack said, accepting a cup of coffee. For everything. Eleanor's expression softened momentarily. That child in there has been through enough, so have you. Her tone became businesslike again. Now, what's your plan once you're at the station? Jack sipped his coffee, organizing his thoughts. The hot liquid revived him, clearing away the last cobwebs of sleep and nightmare. Contact Agent Chen, arrange the handoff, but on our terms, controlled environment and installment, multiple exit strategies. And if there is a leak in the FBI? Then we adapt, Jack replied simply. I've already called an old friend from my unit, Sam Reeves. He works private security now. He'll be our backup at the station watching for surveillance. Eleanor nodded approvingly. Good. Never walk into uncertain situations without reinforcements. Jack smiled faintly at the advice. It was solid tactical thinking, the kind he'd learned in the military, but Eleanor had apparently acquired through 8 decades of practical living. How did you get to be so strategic, Eleanor? 40 years as a high school principal, she replied dryly. Hormonal teenagers are more unpredictable than any enemy combatant. The sound of small footsteps announced Emma's arrival. She appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, clutching her teddy bear. Upon seeing Jack, she rushed forward, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You're okay," she mumbled against his shirt. Jack knelt to her level, ignoring the protest from his ribs. "Of course I am, kiddo. Ms. Eleanor took good care of us." Emma looked up at Eleanor with solemn gratitude. "Thank you for helping us, Ms. Eleanor." "You're very welcome, dear," Eleanor replied, her stern features softening. "Now how about some breakfast? You'll need your strength today." As Eleanor busied herself preparing pancakes, a deliberate choice, Jack suspected, to maintain some normalcy for Emma, Olivia joined them. She looked better after some rest, though anxiety still shadowed her eyes. Her borrowed clothes fit reasonably well, and she'd pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail. Jack was struck again by her resilience, the quiet determination that had led her to stand against Cooper's corruption despite the risks. "I called Agent Chen back," Jack informed her as she accepted a cup of coffee. "We're meeting at the old train station downtown at 9. My friend Sam will be there as backup." "Can we trust him?" Olivia asked. "With my life," Jack confirmed. "With Emma's life. We served together for 10 years. Olivia nodded, accepting his assessment. "What about Eleanor? Will she be safe here after we leave? If they track us?" "I've thought of that," Jack said. "Eleanor, I'd like you to visit your sister in Boulder today, just as a precaution." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Evelyn will be delighted. She's been pestering me to visit for weeks." She slid a plate of pancakes in front of Emma. "But I'll go after I see you safely to the station. David will meet us there at 8, remember?" "Us?" Jack questioned. "Of course," Eleanor replied, as if it were obvious. "I'm driving you. That truck of yours is still at the Blue Star, and public transportation is too exposed. My Buick may be old, but it's reliable, and more importantly, unconnected to you." Jack opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, recognizing the determination in Eleanor's expression. It was the same look Catherine had worn when her mind was made up, a comparison that made him both ache with loss and smile with recognition. "Thank you," he said simply. Breakfast proceeded with forced normalcy, Jack encouraging Emma to eat while keeping watch on the street outside. The morning unfolded peacefully, suburban routines beginning as neighbors departed for work, sprinklers activated on carefully maintained lawns, and delivery trucks made their rounds. Nothing suggested Cooper's men had tracked them to this quiet street, but Jack maintained his vigilance. Complacency killed as surely as bullets. At 7:30, they prepared to leave, with Jack doing a final check of the property perimeter to ensure they weren't being observed. Eleanor packed a small bag for Emma, a change of clothes, some snacks, and a few books to keep her occupied. Small comforts that might make a big difference in the hours ahead. Eleanor's Buick was parked in her detached garage, accessible via a side door that wasn't visible from the street. The vehicle was immaculately maintained, its aged exterior belying the sound mechanical condition Eleanor insisted upon. Jack helped Emma into the back seat, where she could lie down out of sight if necessary. Olivia joined her, while Jack took the passenger seat, positioning himself to monitor their surroundings as Eleanor drove. "Ready?" Eleanor asked, starting the engine. Jack nodded, his expression grim. "Let's go." The drive to the downtown train station took 20 minutes, Eleanor navigating the morning traffic with the confidence of someone who had driven these streets for decades. Jack maintained a vigilant watch for any vehicles that might be following them, but detected no surveillance. Either Cooper's men were exceptionally skilled, or they had genuinely lost the trail last night. Jack suspected the latter, but prepared for the former. The Silver Pine train station was a historic red brick building that had served the community since the early 1900s. Once the hub of the town's commerce, it had fallen into disrepair in the 1980s before being designated a historic landmark. The current renovation project aimed to preserve its architectural character while repurposing the space for community events and small businesses. The main hall, with its 30-foot ceilings and marble floors, retained much of its original grandeur despite the scaffolding and construction materials that indicated the ongoing work. Eleanor parked in the contractor's lot behind the building, where a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s waited beside a pickup truck. David Winters had his mother's direct gaze and no-nonsense demeanor, though his expression softened when he saw Emma in the back seat. "Mom said you needed access," he said without preamble as they exited the vehicle. She didn't explain why, but said it was important. "The less you know, the better," Jack replied, offering his hand, "but we appreciate the help." David shook his hand firmly. "Any friend of my mother's." He handed Jack a set of keys. "These will get you into the main hall through the service entrance and give you access to the maintenance quarters. The renovation crew doesn't start until 10 today, so you've got the place mostly to yourself for now." "Thank you," Jack said sincerely. David nodded, then turned to his mother. "Ready to head to Aunt Evelyn's? I've got the day off. Figured I'd drive you." Eleanor embraced Jack briefly. "Be careful," she murmured, "and bring that child back safe." "I will," Jack promised. As Eleanor and David departed, Jack surveyed their surroundings once more before guiding Emma and Olivia toward the service entrance. The heavy metal door opened with a creak, revealing a dimly lit corridor that smelled of fresh paint and old wood. "Stay close," Jack instructed, leading them through the maintenance area and into the main hall. The grand space was impressive even in its partially renovated state. 30-foot ceilings arched overhead, supported by ornate columns. Large windows allowed morning light to stream across the marble floor, while scaffolding along one wall indicated the ongoing restoration work. The space was largely empty, save for a few workers setting up for an afternoon event, arranging chairs in the far corner. "Perfect," Jack murmured, assessing the tactical advantages of the location. Multiple exits, good sight lines, plenty of cover if needed, and enough innocuous activity to deter overt violence. He checked his watch. 7:50 a.m. 10 minutes before Sam was due to arrive, over an hour before the scheduled meeting with Agent Chen. Time to prepare. "Emma," Jack said, kneeling to his daughter's level, "remember how we talked about safe places? This is like that game. If anything happens, if I tell you to run, I want you to go through that door." He pointed to a maintenance entrance partially hidden behind a column. "Follow the corridor to the end, turn right, and there's a janitor's closet. Lock yourself inside and don't come out unless you hear our special word." "Lighthouse," Emma recited solemnly. "That's right," Jack confirmed, his chest tight with a mixture of pride and concern. No 8-year-old should need such instructions, but Emma's understanding might save her life. "And if a stranger tries to take you?" "Scream as loud as I can and fight dirty," Emma replied, repeating the self-defense basics he'd taught her. "Eyes, throat, knees." Jack nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Good girl." A noise from the main entrance drew Jack's attention. He straightened, positioning himself between the newcomer and Emma, his hand instinctively moving toward the tactical knife in his boot. But the tension left his shoulders as he recognized the man entering the hall. Sam Reeves stood 6'3", his powerful frame making him an imposing presence despite his casual attire. At 50, his close-cropped hair had gone completely gray, but his movements retained the fluid efficiency that had made him one of the best in their unit. His dark eyes scanned the hall with professional assessment before settling on Jack with a hint of warmth. "Sullivan," Sam acknowledged, approaching with measured steps. "You look like hell." "Good to see you too," Jack replied, the familiarity of their banter a brief respite from the tension of the past 12 hours. Sam's gaze moved to Emma, his expression softening. "Hey there, Squirt. You've grown since I saw you last." Emma offered a small smile. "Hi, Uncle Sam." Sam turned his attention to Olivia, immediately assessing her as the one needing protection. His eyes took in her borrowed clothes, her nervous posture, the way she stayed close to Jack, all data points in his security evaluation. "Ms. Reed, Sam Reeves, I'll be helping ensure your safety today." Olivia nodded, clearly relieved at the additional support. "Thank you for coming. Jack filled me in on the basics," Sam said, turning back to Jack. "Cooper Industries, money laundering, FBI witness. What he didn't explain is why you're involved." "Wrong place, wrong time," Jack replied. "Emma and I walked into a situation at the Blue Star last night. Couldn't walk away." Sam's expression tightened. "And Emma saw it all?" Jack nodded grimly. unfortunately. Sam shook his head slightly. Let's make sure she doesn't see any more violence today. He gestured toward a secluded corner of the hall. I've secured that area. Good visibility of all approaches, quick access to 2 exits, and enough cover if things go sideways. As they moved toward the designated spot, Sam briefed Jack on his preliminary security assessment. I've been watching the approaches since 0730. No obvious surveillance yet, but Cooper's people will be thorough. They'll have the building under observation before your FBI contact arrives. Speaking of which, Jack said, lowering his voice so Emma wouldn't overhear, I'm not entirely convinced the FBI is secure. Someone compromised Olivia's safe house location. Sam nodded, unsurprised. Cooper has the resources to buy information. Could be anyone from a janitor to a senior agent. That's why I want you watching Agent Chen when she arrives, Jack explained. See if she's alone or if she brings backup. Watch for any communication that might suggest a setup. Copy that, Sam agreed. I'll position myself in the south gallery. Good vantage point, plenty of shadow. They reached the corner Sam had selected, where he had already arranged a small table and chairs, inconspicuous enough to blend with the event preparations elsewhere in the hall. Emma took a seat, pulling out a small coloring book and pencils that Eleanor had provided, while Olivia remained standing, too anxious to sit. What time is your contact due? Sam asked. 9 o'clock, Jack replied, checking his watch. It was now 8:15. I'll start my surveillance circuit, Sam decided. Check all entrances, identify potential hostiles. He touched a small earpiece. Channel 3 on your receiver. I'll maintain communication. Jack nodded, retrieving a similar earpiece from the small go bag Sam had brought. The familiar routine of preparing for an operation settled his mind, bringing clarity and focus. This might not be a military mission, but the principles remain the same. Identify threats, secure the principal, maintain escape routes, anticipate enemy actions. As Sam departed to begin his surveillance, Jack turned to Olivia. When Agent Chen arrives, let me do the talking initially. I need to assess whether she's compromised. How will you know? Olivia asked. Inconsistencies in her story, unusual body language, unnatural phrasing, Jack explained. Sam and I have worked enough counterintelligence to spot the signs. Olivia nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her expression. And if she is compromised? Then we move to Plan B, Jack said simply. Get you to a different federal agency, maybe the U.S. Marshals. They have more experience with witness protection anyway. Jack turned his attention to Emma, who was coloring quietly, her small face set in concentration. Despite everything she'd witnessed, she maintained a resilience that continually amazed him. Catherine's daughter through and through. That's beautiful, Em, he commented, glancing at her drawing, a lighthouse on a rocky shore, detailed with remarkable skill for her age. Emma looked up with a small smile. It's our special word. I thought if I drew it, it might keep us safe. Jack's throat tightened with emotion. That's a wonderful idea. The next 40 minutes passed in tense vigilance. Sam reported regularly through the earpiece, noting the arrival of more event staff, a security guard beginning his rounds, and an elderly couple who entered to inquire about an upcoming community dance. Nothing suspicious, but Jack maintained his alertness, knowing how quickly situations could change. At 8:57, Sam's voice came through the earpiece again. Movement at the north entrance. Black SUV, government plates. 2 occupants exiting, female in a suit, likely your Agent Chen. Well companion, armed, standard issue, shoulder holster. They're approaching the main doors now. Jack straightened, his senses sharpening. Copy that. Keep eyes on the companion. He turned to Olivia. They're here. Stay with Emma. If anything happens, anything at all that feels wrong, take her through that maintenance door we discussed. Olivia nodded, moving closer to Emma, who looked up from her drawing with sudden concern. It's okay, sweetheart, Jack assured her. I'm just going to talk to the people who are going to help Ms. Olivia. Stay here with her, all right? Emma nodded solemnly. Be careful, Dad. Always am, he replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. Jack moved toward the center of the hall, positioning himself where he had clear sight lines to all entrances, while maintaining a tactical distance from columns that could provide cover if needed. His injured ribs protested as he adjusted his stance, but he pushed the discomfort aside, focusing on the approaching figures. Agent Diana Chen entered first, her bearing professional and alert. In her early 40s, she moved with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her suit conservative but well-tailored. Behind her walked a man Jack immediately identified as another agent. Late 30s, athletic build, the slight bulge of a shoulder holster visible beneath his jacket. Mr. Sullivan, Agent Chen called, approaching with hand extended. Special Agent Diana Chen, thank you for contacting us. We've been very concerned about Miss Reed's safety. Jack shook her hand, studying her face for any signs of deception. You'll understand if I'm cautious, Agent Chen. Someone compromised Miss Reed's safe house location. Chen's expression tightened. Yes, we're investigating that breach. It's our top priority, along with Ms. Reed's safety, of course. And your colleague? Jack nodded toward the male agent. Special Agent Tom Ramirez, Chen introduced. My partner on this case. Ramirez nodded but remained several paces back, his eyes continuously scanning the hall. Standard protection protocol. His positioning suggested professional training, but something about his surveillance pattern struck Jack as odd. He was paying more attention to the maintenance doors than the main entrances, as if he already knew which escape routes were most likely. Is Miss Reed here? Agent Chen asked, her tone carefully neutral. She is, Jack confirmed. But before I bring you to her, I need some assurances. Chen's eyebrow raised slightly. What kind of assurances, Mr. Sullivan? Information, Jack replied. How did Cooper's men find Ms. Reed at her safe house? Chen hesitated, exchanging a glance with Ramirez that lasted a fraction too long. We're still investigating that breach. Our initial assessments suggest they may have followed one of our agents during a routine supply delivery. Sam's voice came through Jack's earpiece, too low for the agents to hear. Ramirez keeps checking his watch, expecting something, and there's movement outside. Two men just pulled up in a sedan, business attire but military bearing, taking positions with sight lines to both main exits. Jack maintained his outward composure, but internally, his alert level elevated. Something wasn't right. That's interesting, he said to Chen, watching her reaction closely. Because according to Ms. Reed, her safe house location was known only to you and two other agents. No supply deliveries were scheduled. Chen's expression flickered, a momentary tightening around the eyes that betrayed surprise. Ms. Reed might be confused. The trauma of last night. She's quite clear, Jack interrupted. Just as she's clear about the documents she provided you 3 weeks ago, the ones detailing Cooper's payments to local officials. Another subtle tell, Chen's left hand tensed slightly. Yes, of course. Those documents are the cornerstone of our case. Including the offshore account records? Jack pressed, watching closely. Chen nodded. Certainly. As I said, key evidence. Jack allowed himself a thin smile. That's odd because Ms. Reed never mentioned offshore accounts to me. I made that detail up just now. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Chen's professional demeanor hardened, while Ramirez's hand moved subtly toward his holster. I think we've wasted enough time, Mr. Sullivan, Chen said, her voice taking on a colder edge. Where is Ms. Reed? Sullivan, Sam's urgent voice came through the earpiece. We've got a situation. 4 more hostiles just entered through the South Service corridor. They're spreading out, establishing a perimeter. This is a trap. Jack had suspected as much from the moment Chen failed his test, but hearing confirmation still sent a surge of adrenaline through his system. His mind raced through options, calculating risks and escape routes. It seems we have a problem, Agent Chen, he said calmly. You're working for Cooper. Chen's facade dropped entirely. You have no idea what you're involved in, Sullivan. Cooper has reach you can't imagine. The smart play is to give us Reed and walk away with your daughter. The mention of Emma sent ice through Jack's veins, but he maintained his composure. Not going to happen. Chen sighed as if disappointed. I was hoping to resolve this quietly. She glanced at Ramirez, who was now openly reaching for his weapon. Take him. Find the woman. Jack had anticipated this moment from the second they'd entered. As Ramirez drew his gun, Jack was already in motion, closing the distance between them with explosive speed. Years of close-quarters combat training took over as he executed a disarming technique, grabbing Ramirez's wrist and twisting sharply while delivering a precise strike to the nerve cluster in the agent's forearm. The gun clattered to the floor as Ramirez gasped in pain. Jack followed through with a sweeping leg takedown that sent the man crashing to the marble floor. A controlled strike to Ramirez's temple rendered him unconscious before he could recover. Chen was reaching into her jacket, presumably for her own weapon, but Jack was already pivoting toward her. Before she could draw, he closed the distance, pinning her arm and using her own momentum to spin her around and secure her in a hold that immobilized without causing permanent damage. "Cooper underestimated you," Chen hissed, struggling against his grip. "People usually do," Jack replied grimly. Sam's voice crackled through the earpiece again. "Hostiles converging on your position. 30 seconds max, get to the extraction point." Jack secured Chen with a zip tie from his pocket, standard equipment in his personal kit, and did the same for the unconscious Ramirez. "The authorities will be interested to hear how federal agents conspired with a criminal enterprise," Jack told Chen as he finished binding her hands. "I suspect your career in law enforcement is over." Not waiting for her response, Jack sprinted back toward where he'd left Emma and Olivia, his body protesting the sudden exertion. When he rounded the corner, his heart nearly stopped. The table was empty, the coloring book abandoned. But before panic could set in, he spotted movement near the maintenance door they'd discussed earlier. Olivia was ushering Emma through, having recognized the danger themselves. "Smart woman," Jack muttered, changing direction to intercept them in the maintenance corridor. He burst through the door just as Olivia and Emma disappeared around a corner. Catching up to them in a few long strides, he found Emma wide-eyed with fear, but still moving purposefully. "Dad," she cried, reaching for him. "It's okay, kiddo," he assured her, squeezing her hand briefly. "But we need to keep moving. Fast and quiet, remember?" Olivia's face was pale but determined. "I saw men with guns entering from the other side of the hall. I remembered what you said about the maintenance door." "You did exactly right," Jack confirmed, guiding them deeper into the service corridors. "The FBI agents were compromised. Cooper has more reach than we realized." "Where are we going?" Olivia asked, her voice tight with fear. "Secondary extraction point," Jack replied. "Sam's meeting us there." The service corridors formed a maze throughout the old building, but Jack navigated with confidence, having committed the layout to memory. They moved swiftly through the dimly lighted passages, the sounds of pursuit growing more distant as they took a route their pursuers wouldn't anticipate. Emma kept pace remarkably well, her small hand clutching Jack's tightly. The fear in her eyes was tempered with trust, absolute faith that her father would keep her safe. That trust was both a comfort and a terrifying responsibility. They reached a metal door marked Utility Access, which Jack unlocked with one of the keys David had provided. Beyond lay a narrow passage that led to the building's original coal delivery chute, now repurposed as an emergency exit. "Through here," Jack directed, helping Emma navigate the confined space. "It leads to the loading dock on the east side." As they emerged into the morning sunlight, Sam was already waiting beside an unmarked van, engine running. His expression was grim, a thin line of blood trickling from a cut above his eye, suggesting he'd encountered resistance. "3 hostiles neutralized on the south side," he reported as they approached. "Non-lethal takedowns, but they won't stay down forever. We need to move." Jack helped Emma into the van's back seat, ensuring her seatbelt was secure, then turned to assist Olivia. "Where are we heading?" he asked Sam as they all climbed in. "Off the grid," Sam replied, pulling away from the loading dock with controlled urgency. "I've got a hunting cabin in the mountains. No one knows about it except my ex-wife, and she hasn't spoken to me in 15 years. As they navigated away from the train station, taking an indirect route to avoid potential pursuit, Jack finally allowed himself a moment to process what had just happened. The FBI was compromised at a high level. Cooper's influence extended further than they'd imagined. And now they were fugitives, running from both criminals and the authorities who should have been protecting them. Emma leaned against him, exhaustion and stress finally taking their toll. Her eyes drooped despite her obvious effort to stay alert. "It's okay to rest, kiddo," Jack said softly, stroking her hair. "I've got you." As Emma drifted into an uneasy sleep, Jack met Olivia's gaze across the van. Her expression held the same question that was troubling him. What now? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. They needed a new plan, one that accounted for Cooper's extensive reach and influence. The path forward would be dangerous, but Jack Sullivan had never backed down from protecting the innocent, Not in Afghanistan, and certainly not now, with his daughter's safety at stake. Sam turned the van onto a mountain road, leaving the town of Silver Pine behind. "We've got about 2 hours to the cabin," and he informed them. "Time to regroup and figure out our next move." Jack nodded, his mind already analyzing the situation, calculating risks and options. Cooper might have powerful connections and seemingly unlimited resources, but he'd made a critical error. He'd threatened Jack Sullivan's family, and Jack would make sure that was a mistake Cooper would regret for the rest of his life. The van climbed steadily into the mountains, the familiar landscape of Colorado receding behind them. Whatever came next, Jack was certain of one thing. This was no longer just about protecting a witness. It had become personal. And when Jack Sullivan took something personally, the outcome was inevitable. He would protect his family, ensure justice for Olivia, and dismantle Cooper's operation piece by piece, regardless of the cost. It was, after all, what Catherine would have expected of him. And Jack Sullivan had never let his wife down. Not in life, and certainly not in memory. Pine-scented mountain air filled the van as they climbed higher into the Colorado Rockies. The winding road narrowed, transitioning from asphalt to gravel as they left civilization behind. Emma had fallen asleep against Jack's shoulder, her small body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Olivia gazed out the window, her expression reflecting both wonder at the magnificent landscape and anxiety about their uncertain future. "Almost there," Sam announced, guiding the vehicle around a particularly sharp bend. "5 more minutes," Jack nodded, his tactical mind already mapping the terrain. The increasing isolation worked both for and against them, harder for Cooper's men to find, but equally difficult to summon help if needed. His military training had taught him to assess all variables, and right now the equation contained too many unknowns. "How secure is this place?" he asked Sam. "Very. Purchased through a shell company years ago. No paperwork connecting it to me. Solar power, well water, satellite communications I can control. Stocked with enough supplies for 2 weeks." Sam's voice carried the confidence of someone who had planned for contingencies. "I come up here 4 times a year, just enough to maintain the property without establishing a pattern." The road ended at a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Nestled against the tree line sat a modest log cabin, its weathered exterior blending naturally with the surroundings. To the untrained eye, it might appear neglected, but Jack recognized the strategic advantages immediately. Clear sight lines in all directions, multiple escape routes through the forest, and a raised position that would make an approach from below easily detectable. "Nice setup," Jack commented as Sam parked behind the structure, concealing the vehicle from the road. "Paranoia has its benefits," Sam replied with a grim smile. Jack gently woke Emma, who blinked in confusion before remembering their situation. Her face immediately tensed, looking to her father for reassurance. "We're safe here, kiddo," Jack assured her. Uncle Sam's special hideout. They entered the cabin, which proved far more sophisticated than its rustic exterior suggested. The main room featured comfortable but practical furniture, a wood-burning stove, and modernized kitchen. 2 bedrooms branched off from the central space, along with a surprisingly well-appointed bathroom. Most impressive was the communications center tucked into one corner. Multiple screens, satellite equipment, and what appeared to be military-grade encryption hardware. "Welcome to the fortress," Sam said, locking the reinforced door behind them. "Not exactly the Ritz, but it'll keep us alive." While Emma explored the cabin with cautious curiosity, Sam activated the security systems, motion sensors around the perimeter, cameras covering all approaches, and what Jack recognized as a signal jammer that would prevent any unauthorized communications within a half-mile radius. "Let me see that shoulder," Sam said to Jack, noticing his friend's stiffness. Jack removed his shirt, revealing Eleanor's neat bandaging. Sam examined the knife wound with professional detachment, checking for signs of infection. "Clean enough. Needs stitches, but the butterfly closures are holding." "Ribs?" "Cracked, at least 2, Jack confirmed. "Manageable." Sam nodded, familiar with Jack's high pain threshold from their service days. "There's a first aid kit in the bathroom. Military grade. Help yourself." Olivia had been standing near the window, watching the forest with evident anxiety. She turned to face them, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. "What happens now?" she asked. "The trial starts Monday morning. Sam gestured for everyone to gather around the dining table. First, we assess what we know. Cooper's reach extends into the FBI, at least to Agent Chen's level. That means normal channels are compromised. We need to determine how high the corruption goes, Jack added. If Chen was compromised, who else might be? Her direct supervisor? The field office director? We can't trust any of them, Olivia stated flatly. Not after what happened at the train station. Agreed, Sam said. But there must be legitimate authorities we can approach. U.S. Marshal Service, maybe. They handle witness protection independently from the FBI. Jack considered this. Possibly, but how do we make contact without exposing ourselves? Cooper's resources are substantial. He'll have people watching all official channels. I may have a solution, Sam said, moving to his communications center. I've maintained certain unofficial contacts from our service days, people who operate outside normal bureaucratic constraints. Black ops? Jack asked, raising an eyebrow. More like gray, retired special forces who now work in various agencies, people who owe me favors and whose integrity I trust implicitly. Sam began typing on one of the keyboards. Give me an hour to make some secure inquiries. Jack turned to Emma, who had been listening with wide eyes. How about we check out the kitchen, kiddo? Maybe find a snack? Emma nodded, recognizing her father's attempt to distract her from the troubling adult conversation. As they examined the well-stocked pantry, Jack marveled again at his daughter's resilience. Many children would be completely unraveled by the events of the past 18 hours, yet Emma maintained a quiet courage that both heartened and saddened him. No 8-year-old should need to be this brave. They prepared simple sandwiches for everyone, a domestic task that seemed incongruous with their fugitive status. Emma appeared to take comfort in the normalcy of the activity, carefully arranging the food on plates she found in the cabinets. Dad, she asked quietly while spreading peanut butter on bread, are the bad people going to find us here? Jack paused, considering his answer carefully. He'd never lied to Emma, even after Catherine's death, when the temptation to soften the brutal truth had been overwhelming. I don't think so, he replied honestly. Uncle Sam chose this place very carefully, and we have good people helping us. Emma nodded, accepting his assessment. No, Simon. Olivia going to be okay. We're going to make sure of it, Jack promised. That's what we do, right? Help people who need it. Like Mom always said, Emma agreed, a small smile touching her lips. Be the good you want to see in the world. Jack's throat tightened, Catherine's favorite saying, now preserved in their daughter's memory. Exactly like that. They brought the food to the table where Olivia sat studying a map of the surrounding area. She accepted the sandwich with a grateful smile. Thank you, Emma, she said. This looks delicious. Emma beamed at the acknowledgement, settling into a chair beside Olivia. My dad says we're going to help you. Olivia glanced at Jack, then back to Emma. Your dad is a very brave man. He's already helped me more than I could have expected. He was a Marine, Emma stated with obvious pride. He protected people all over the world. Now he fixes cars, but he still protects people. Jack felt a curious mixture of embarrassment and gratification at his daughter's simple assessment of his life. Out of the mouths of babes, as Catherine would have said. Sam rejoined them, his expression cautiously optimistic. I've made contact with someone who might help. Thomas Gaines, former Army intelligence, now with the Justice Department's Internal Affairs Division. If there's corruption in the FBI, he's exactly the person we want investigating. Can he be trusted? Jack asked. As much as anyone. He was part of the team that exposed the McCarthy scandal 3 years ago. Remember that corruption ring inside Homeland Security? Cost him a promotion, but he did the right thing. Sam grabbed a sandwich. He's agreed to meet us, but not here. Neutral location tomorrow morning. Where? Jack asked. Granite Falls National Park Visitor Center. Public enough to deter violence, remote enough to spot surveillance. He'll come alone. Sam took a bite of his sandwich. Solid choice on the peanut butter, Emma. The crunchy kind is definitely superior. Emma giggled, the childish sound incongruously delightful amid the tension. What about tonight? Olivia asked. Cooper's men will be searching. We stay here, Sam replied. Cabin secure, and I've got enough hardware to hold off a small army if necessary. He nodded toward a gun safe mounted to the wall. Though I'd prefer to avoid that scenario. As evening approached, they established a watch rotation. Jack insisted on taking the first shift despite his injuries. While Sam showed Olivia and Emma to their quarters, he settled into a chair with clear sight lines to all approaches, a rifle across his knees. The familiar weight of the weapon brought back memories of countless night watches in hostile territory. Though this time, the precious cargo he protected wasn't classified intelligence or military hardware, but his daughter's future. The forest grew quiet as darkness fell, only the occasional call of an owl or rustle of wind through pine needles breaking the silence. Jack used the solitude to process everything that had happened since their late-night milk run. Maxwell's sacrifice continued to trouble him, a man who had chosen the wrong path but found redemption in his final moments. Jack wondered about Maxwell's daughter, Sophia. Would she ever know that her father had died protecting another man's child? Some truths were perhaps better left untold. His thoughts turned to Olivia Reed. Her courage in standing against Cooper's corruption had cost her everything: her career, her home, her safety. Yet she remained determined to testify, to see justice done regardless of personal cost. That kind of moral conviction was rare, particularly when facing such dangerous opposition. The cabin door opened quietly as Olivia herself stepped onto the porch, wrapping a borrowed jacket around her shoulders against the mountain chill. "Couldn't sleep," she explained, settling into the chair beside him. "Too much adrenaline still in my system." Jack nodded. "Common reaction. It'll catch up with you eventually." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the vast canopy of stars providing a spectacular view absent from city skies. "I never thanked you properly," Olivia finally said. "You and Emma could have died because of me." "We were in the wrong place at the wrong time," Jack replied. "Or the right place at the right time, from my perspective." She turned to face him. "Why did you help me? You could have walked away, taken Emma and left. Most people would have." Jack considered the question, though the answer seemed self-evident to him. "Because it was the right thing to do. And I'm trying to teach Emma that standing up for what's right matters, especially when it's difficult." "Your wife would be proud," Olivia said softly. "Emma mentioned her earlier, said she passed away 3 years ago." "Car accident," Jack confirmed, the familiar ache returning. "Drunk driver crossed the center line. Catherine died at the scene." "I'm sorry," Olivia said, genuine compassion in her voice. "It must have been devastating." "It was," Jack acknowledged. "Still is sometimes. But Emma needed me to keep going, so I did." He rarely discussed Catherine with anyone outside family, yet something about this moment, the quiet night, the shared danger they'd faced, made the conversation feel natural. "What was she like?" Olivia asked. A small smile touched Jack's lips. "Brilliant, compassionate, stubborn as hell when she believed in something. She was an environmental attorney, specialized in protecting Colorado's watersheds from industrial pollution. We met when she sued a client of mine." "She sued you?" Olivia sounded surprised. "No, though she threatened to," Jack chuckled at the memory. "I was doing security consulting after leaving the Marines. Corporate client wanted to build a factory upstream from a protected area. Catherine represented the conservation group opposing the project. She demolished our security presentation so thoroughly that I ended up agreeing with her. And then? I asked her to coffee. She refused. I sent research supporting her position that my client hadn't disclosed. She reconsidered the coffee. The memory remained crystal clear. Catherine's suspicious expression slowly warming as she realized he was genuinely interested in environmental protection, not just in her. "Sounds like an exceptional woman," Olivia said. "She was," Jack agreed. "Emma has her spirit, same determination, same moral compass." Olivia nodded toward the cabin. "Emma's amazing. Most children would be traumatized after what she's been through, but she seems so resilient." "She's had practice," Jack said quietly. "Losing her mother taught her about survival, about adapting to painful circumstances. I wish she hadn't needed to learn those lessons so young, but I'm grateful for her strength now." The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence again. Eventually, Olivia returned inside to attempt sleep, leaving Jack alone with the night and his thoughts. When Sam relieved him several hours later, Jack checked on Emma before settling onto the couch for his own rest. She slept peacefully, teddy bear clutched to her chest, one small hand outflung, as if reaching for something in her dreams. He adjusted her blanket gently before retreating, knowing they both needed whatever rest they could manage before tomorrow's challenges. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through pine branches and the rich aroma of coffee permeating the cabin. Sam had prepared a substantial breakfast, explaining that they should eat well while they could. The meeting with Thomas Gaines was scheduled for 10 a.m., giving them ample time to plan their approach. "We'll take my backup vehicle," Sam explained, pouring coffee for the adults. "It's a Jeep, better suited for the terrain and unknown to anyone who might be tracking us." "What's our contingency if things go wrong?" Jack asked, ever the tactician. "Three fallback positions, emergency extraction routes from each." Sam spread a map across the table, indicating the locations. "If we get separated, rendezvous here at sunset." He pointed to a marker labeled Eagle's Nest, apparently a rock formation overlooking the valley. "And if Gaines isn't alone?" Olivia asked, the worry evident in her voice. "Then we don't engage," Jack answered firmly. "First sign of an ambush, we withdraw, no heroics." Sam nodded agreement. "The meeting point gives us maximum visibility. We'll spot any surveillance long before reaching the visitor center." They departed at 9:15, the Jeep handling the rough mountain roads with ease. Emma sat between Jack and Olivia in the back seat, her backpack filled with snacks and activities Eleanor had thoughtfully provided. Jack maintained vigilant watch for any signs of pursuit, but the journey proceeded without incident. Granite Falls National Park spread across thousands of acres of pristine wilderness. The visitor center occupied a strategic position near the park entrance, a rustic yet modern structure of stone and timber that offered educational displays about local wildlife and geology. This early in the morning, only a few tourists wandered the parking lot, most preparing for day hikes into the surrounding mountains. Sam parked with clear sight lines to all approaches, leaving the keys in the ignition for a quick departure if necessary. They entered the center as a group, positioning themselves near the topographical map display that offered both good visibility and proximity to the rear exit. At precisely 10 a.m., a man in hiking attire entered the center. Mid-50s, trim build, with the watchful eyes of someone accustomed to assessing threats. He carried no visible weapon, but Jack noted the slight bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his lightweight jacket. Thomas Gaines moved with the relaxed confidence of someone who had spent decades in the field, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on their group. "Sam," he acknowledged with a nod. "Been a while." "Tom," Sam returned evenly. "Appreciate you coming." Gaines's attention shifted to Jack, recognition dawning in his expression. "Sullivan, right? Afghanistan, 2013, Operation Copper Shield." Jack nodded, somewhat surprised. "You were involved?" "Intelligence support. Never met in person, but I reviewed the after-action reports. Good work under impossible circumstances." Gaines turned to Olivia. "And you must be Ms. Reed. You've caused quite a stir." "Not intentionally," Olivia replied. Gaines smiled slightly. "Whistleblowers rarely do." His expression grew serious as he addressed the group. "Let's find somewhere more private to talk." They moved to an outdoor seating area, deliberately choosing a table distant from other visitors. Jack positioned Emma with her coloring book at an adjacent table, close enough to watch but far enough to avoid overhearing potentially troubling information. "Here's where we stand," Gaines began without preamble. "The FBI Denver field office has officially reported Olivia Reed as missing from protective custody. They're claiming concern for her safety, but unofficially, there's significant worry about the Cooper Industries case falling apart without her testimony." "Agent Chen is compromised," Jack stated flatly. "Almost certainly," Gaines agreed. "Based on what Sam told me, she's likely on Cooper's payroll. The question is how far the corruption extends." "And you can help determine that?" Olivia asked. Gaines nodded. "Internal Affairs has had concerns about the Denver office for months. Nothing concrete enough for formal investigation, but suspicious patterns of case outcomes favoring certain influential parties. Your situation provides the leverage we need to launch a full inquiry." "How does that help Ms. Reed testify on Monday?" Jack pressed. "Cooper's people won't stop coming after her." "That's where it gets complicated," Gaines admitted. "Normally, witness security would fall to the Marshal Service, but given the apparent leak within federal law enforcement, traditional channels might be compromised." "So what's the alternative?" Sam asked. A secure facility operated by my division. Off the books, used for high-value witnesses in sensitive corruption cases. Gaines leaned forward. We can protect Ms. Reed until her testimony, then transition her to formal witness protection then afterward. Jack exchanged glances with Sam, both men evaluating the proposal with ingrained skepticism. How do we know your operation isn't compromised as well? Jack asked. Fair question, Gaines acknowledged. The facility reports directly to the Deputy Attorney General. Only 3 people know its location, and all communications are encrypted using protocols that change daily. It's as secure as anything in the federal system. And how would we get there, Olivia asked. I have transportation standing by, small airstrip 20 miles from here, private plane with trusted pilot. Gaines checked his watch. Wheels up in 2 hours if you agree. I need assurances, Jack said firmly, about Emma's safety and what happens after Olivia testifies. Gaines nodded. The child would come with us, of course. As for aftermath, once Miss Reed's testimony is recorded, we can offer full witness protection, new identity, relocation, financial support, standard protocol for high-risk witnesses. A sudden tension in Sam's posture caught Jack's attention. His friend's gaze had shifted toward the visitor center entrance, where 2 men in casual hiking gear had just entered. Nothing about them appeared immediately threatening, yet something had triggered Sam's alarm. Tom, Sam said quietly, those 2 who just walked in, friends of yours? Gaines didn't turn to look, a telling restraint. No, my people know to maintain distance until contacted. Jack casually shifted position to get a better view. The men were methodically scanning the center, their movements too coordinated for ordinary tourists. His combat instincts hummed a warning. We've got company, he murmured, making eye contact with Emma and giving the subtle hand signal they'd practiced. 3 fingers tapped against his leg. Immediately, she began gathering her belongings, understanding the need for a quick exit. How did they find us? Olivia whispered, tension evident in her voice. Questions later, Sam replied tersely. East exit, 30 seconds. Gaines reached slowly into his jacket, producing not a weapon, but a small electronic device. Signal tracker, he explained, scanning their group. Someone's carrying a beacon. The device emitted a soft ping as it passed near Olivia, who looked bewildered. That's impossible. I left everything behind at the safe house. Clothing? Jack asked sharply. Borrowed from Eleanor's granddaughter, she confirmed. Gaines focused the scanner more precisely, homing in on the signal. It's in your shoe. Olivia's expression transformed from confusion to anger. The boots, Chen insisted I wear them at the safe house. Said they were protocol approved for witness security. Clever, Sam muttered. Tracking device embedded in the heel, activated remotely. They've been following you since you left the Blue Star. The men at the entrance had noticed their huddled conversation and were moving with new purpose toward their position. Jack saw one speak into a concealed microphone, calling for backup, almost certainly. We need to move, Jack stated, rising casually as if simply continuing their tour. Emma, remember our game at the train station? Same rules apply. Emma nodded solemnly, taking his outstretched hand. Back as it leads to a maintenance trail, Gaines informed them quietly. Half-mile to the ranger station. I have people there. Olivia, leave the boots, Sam instructed. Now. She quickly slipped them off, leaving them under the table as they began moving toward the exit. Jack kept Emma close, his body positioned to shield her if necessary. They maintained a measured pace, quick enough for purpose, but not so fast as to broadcast alarm. They were halfway to the exit when one of the men called out, Federal agents, Ms. Reed, please remain where you are. Jack didn't break stride, knowing the claim was almost certainly false. Cooper's men had found them, using Olivia as a human tracking beacon. The tactical situation deteriorated further and 2 more men entered through the exit they had been approaching, effectively boxing them in. Gaines made a swift decision. Follow my lead, he murmured, then raised his voice. Justice Department, Internal Affairs. These individuals are under my protection. Stand down immediately. He displayed official credentials, creating momentary confusion among the pursuers. It was enough disruption for Sam to move, sliding smoothly between display cases to approach the nearest threat from behind. What followed was a carefully choreographed extraction that spoke to years of professional training. While Gaines maintained the verbal confrontation, drawing attention and creating confusion about jurisdictional authority, Sam neutralized one threat with a precise strike to the brainstem that rendered the man unconscious without visible violence. Jack simultaneously guided Emma and Olivia behind the cover of a large topographical display, positioning them for the quickest route to the alternative exit. A family of tourists unwittingly provided additional cover, their noisy entrance and excited chatter about hiking trails creating further distraction. Jack seized the opportunity, leading Emma and Olivia toward the side exit, while Gaines continued his official-sounding demands for identification from the remaining agents. They slipped outside into bright mountain sunshine, quickly moving around the building toward the parking area where Sam's Jeep waited. Jack helped Emma into the vehicle, then turned to assist Olivia, who was moving awkwardly in sock feet across the gravel lot. "Sam and Gaines?" she asked anxiously. "They'll follow their own extraction route," Jack explained, starting the engine. "Rendezvous at the fallback position." The Jeep roared to life just as shouting erupted from inside the visitor center. Jack pulled away with controlled urgency, avoiding the main park exit where reinforcements might be waiting. Instead, he followed a service road that curved around the facility and into the dense forest beyond. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Remember the eagle's nest that Uncle Sam showed us on the map? That's where we'll meet him and Mr. Gaines." Jack navigated the increasingly rough terrain with precision, grateful for the Jeep's four-wheel drive capability. "Will the bad men follow us?" Emma's question held no panic, only practical concern. "They'll try," Jack acknowledged honestly, "but this vehicle doesn't leave much of a trail, and I know how to disappear in terrain like this." Indeed, Jack had specialized in mountain operations during his final years with the Marines, training extensively in the Colorado Rockies. This landscape offered both challenges and advantages that he understood intimately. He followed game trails and dry creek beds, paths that wouldn't appear on standard maps and would be difficult to track. After 20 minutes of careful navigation, Jack pulled the Jeep into a natural formation of boulders that provided concealment from both ground and air observation. They would continue on foot from here, reducing their signature even further. "We'll need to hike about 2 miles, he informed Olivia, who was examining her feet with concern. "The terrain gets steeper ahead." "I'll manage," she assured him, though the prospect of hiking barefoot through mountain wilderness clearly worried her. Jack rummaged in the back of the Jeep, finding an emergency pack Sam had prepared. Inside were basic survival supplies, including a pair of hiking socks and lightweight trail runners that would fit Olivia reasonably well. "Sam thinks of everything," he commented, handing her the footwear. "Thank goodness," Olivia replied with evident relief. As she laced up the shoes, she asked, "Do you think Gaines is legitimate? Could this be another trap?" Jack considered the question carefully. Sam trusts him, which carries significant weight, and his actions back there weren't those of someone working with Cooper's men. He checked his watch. "We'll know more when we rendezvous." With Emma between them, they began the hike toward the Eagle's Nest. The trail climbed steadily through pine forest, occasionally opening to reveal spectacular views of the valley below. Under different circumstances, it would have been an enjoyable family outing. Instead, Jack maintained constant vigilance, regularly checking their back trail for signs of pursuit while keeping Emma's spirits up with impromptu nature lessons. "See those marks on the tree?" he pointed out to Emma. "That's where a bear has been sharpening its claws." Emma examined the scarred bark with fascination. "Is the bear still around?" "Probably not nearby," Jack assured her. "Bears usually avoid humans if they can." "Unlike Cooper's men," Olivia observed dryly. Jack smiled at the grim humor. "True, bears are generally more reasonable." They reached Eagle's Nest by mid-afternoon, a dramatic rock formation that jutted from the mountainside, offering commanding views in all directions. The natural fortress provided excellent defensive position, with only one obvious approach route that could be easily monitored. "Now we wait," Jack said, helping Emma find a comfortable spot in the shade. He distributed water and energy bars from the pack, ensuring they maintained their strength. The mountain air was cool despite the sunshine, and he wrapped his jacket around Emma's shoulders as they settled in for what might be a long vigil. An hour passed with no sign of Sam or Gaines. Jack's concern grew with each passing minute, though he maintained a calm demeanor for Emma's benefit. Olivia paced the small clearing, alternating between anxiety and determination. If they don't come, what's our next move? She finally asked. We have options, Jack replied, though none were particularly appealing. Return to Sam's cabin, attempt contact through his secure communications, or make our way to Denver independently, find alternative means to get you to court on Monday. And if Cooper's men find us first? Jack's expression hardened. That won't happen. A subtle disturbance in the forest below caught his attention, movement too deliberate for wildlife. He motioned for silence, positioning Emma and Olivia behind the largest boulder, while he observed through a natural gap in the rocks. Two figures emerged from the tree line, moving with the careful precision of trained operators. Relief washed through Jack as he recognized Sam's distinctive gait, with Gaines following close behind. Both men appeared unharmed, though Gaines's hiking jacket was torn at the shoulder. Jack whistled the all-clear signal from their Marine days. Sam immediately looked up, returning the signal before leading Gaines up the final approach to the nest. Took the scenic route, Sam explained as they rejoined the group. Had to ensure we weren't being followed. Cooper's men? Jack asked. Definitely not federal agents, Gaines confirmed, catching his breath from the climb. Professional contractors, likely ex-military. They backed off after we established that continuing would create unwanted attention. He gestured to a park ranger truck visible in the distance. Actual authorities responded to the disturbance. Cooper's people wouldn't risk direct confrontation with legitimate law enforcement. So what now? Olivia asked. They know we're in the park. They know we were in the park, Sam corrected. By now, they're establishing search patterns based on standard evasion protocols. But we're not following standard protocols. Gaines nodded agreement. My extraction plan remains viable. We've repositioned the aircraft to a different airstrip, former mining company property, about 5 miles northeast of here. We can reach it by dusk if we move now. Jack studied the man carefully, still not entirely convinced. Before we go anywhere, I need verification of your credentials, something Cooper's resources couldn't fake. Gaines appeared to appreciate the caution rather than take offense. Reasonable request. He considered for a moment, then addressed Sam. Operation Blackfish, Gulf of Aden, 2011. You were extraction team lead when we pulled the CIA asset from the freighter. The extraction code was wintergreen, and you assisted on bringing out the asset's cat despite specific orders against it. Sam's expression softened with recognition. You were monitoring from the AWACS, kept the hostile patrol boats off our position during extraction. The cat's name was Ferdinand, Gaines added with a slight smile. Meanest Siamese I've ever encountered. The specific details of a classified operation, particularly the unofficial aspects that wouldn't appear in formal reports, provided the verification Jack needed. He nodded. Decision made. All right, we follow your extraction plan. He turned to Emma, who had been listening quietly to the adult conversation. Ready for a little more hiking, kiddo? Emma straightened her shoulders, her expression serious but determined. Is it going to help Ms. Olivia? It is, Jack confirmed. Then I'm ready, she declared with the simple courage that continued to amaze him. They departed Eagle's Nest with renewed purpose, following a game trail that Gaines assured them would intersect with an old logging road leading to the airstrip. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees as they made their way northeast, each step bringing them closer to potential safety or another trap. Jack maintained healthy skepticism, but the alternatives were limited, and Gaines had proven himself trustworthy thus far. As they hiked, Gaines filled them in on the broader situation. Cooper's not just facing money laundering charges. Based on the evidence Miss Reed uncovered, we've built a RICO case against his entire operation. The corruption extends to 3 city council members, a county judge, and possibly the deputy mayor of Denver. Which explains the extraordinary measures to silence me, Olivia observed. Exactly, Gaines confirmed. Your testimony is the linchpin. Without it, the case weakens substantially. And after she testifies, Jack asked, what then? Full witness protection, Gaines reiterated. New identity, relocation, financial support to build a new life. Olivia was quiet for several moments, processing the implications. Everything I know, gone, she finally said, her voice soft but resigned. My career, my friends, my home. But you'll be alive, Sam pointed out practically. There is that, she acknowledged with a wan smile, and Cooper will face justice. The logging road appeared as promised, a narrow track overgrown with vegetation but still passable on foot. They increased their pace aware that daylight was fading and night navigation would significantly complicate their journey. The first sign of the airstrip came as the forest thinned, revealing a narrow valley that nature had begun to reclaim from human development. What had once been a busy mining operation was now largely abandoned, with only the concrete runway and a small hangar remaining functional. A twin-engine Cessna waited on the runway, its pilot performing final pre-flight checks. The aircraft was nondescript, with no identifying markings beyond the standard registration numbers, perfectly anonymous for their purposes. Right on schedule, Gaines observed with satisfaction. As they approached the runway, Jack maintained tactical awareness, scanning for any signs of ambush or surveillance. The area appeared secure, with no unexpected vehicles or personnel visible. Still, years of combat experience had taught him that appearances could be deceiving. The pilot noticed their approach and raised a hand in greeting, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the weathered complexion of someone who had spent decades in cockpits. She continued her methodical exterior inspection as they reached the aircraft. "Tom," she acknowledged Gaines with a nod. "Beautiful evening for flying." "Ellen," he returned. "Thanks for the schedule adjustment." "No problem. Weather's clear all the way to our destination." She glanced at the group, her experienced eyes noting Emma with particular attention. "First time flying, little one?" Emma shook her head. "My mom and dad took me to visit Grandma in Florida when I was 5. "Well, this will be a bit different from a commercial flight," Ellen explained kindly. "Smaller, but you can see a lot more. It's like being a bird." Emma's expression brightened at the comparison. "Can I sit by the window?" "Absolutely," Ellen assured her. "Best seats in the house." The simple interaction further reassured Jack. Ellen's manner with Emma reflected genuine warmth rather than forced friendliness, another indication that Gaines's operation was legitimate. Professional mercenaries rarely bothered with such authentic human connections. "We should board," Gaines suggested. "I'd prefer to be airborne before full dark." As they approached the aircraft, Jack placed a hand on Sam's shoulder. "You're not coming with us, are you?" Sam shook his head. "Someone needs to manage the back trail, ensure you're not followed. Besides, I've got a cabin to clean up." He smiled slightly. "We Marines never leave evidence behind." Jack understood the tactical necessity, but still felt reluctance at the separation. Sam had been invaluable throughout this crisis, his skills and resources making survival possible. "Thank you," Jack said simply, extending his hand, "for everything." Sam clasped his hand firmly. "What are old war buddies for?" He knelt to Emma's level. "Take care of your dad, Squirt. He needs looking after sometimes." Emma threw her arms around Sam's neck in a fierce hug. "Will we see you again?" "Count on it," Sam promised. "Maybe not right away, but I'll find you. That's what I do." With final farewells exchanged, they boarded the aircraft. Jack helped Emma with her seatbelt, while Olivia settled into the seat across the narrow aisle. Gaines joined Ellen in the cockpit, reviewing flight plans and communication protocols. The engines roared to life, vibrating through the fuselage as Ellen began taxi procedures. Through the window, Jack watched Sam's figure grow smaller as the aircraft moved toward the runway threshold. His friend raised a hand in final salute before turning toward the forest, disappearing among the trees as dusk settled over the mountains. "Where are we going, Dad?" Emma asked, her face pressed to the window as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. "Somewhere safe," Jack assured her, though he himself didn't know their exact destination. Trust remained a carefully rationed commodity, even with Gaines proving helpful thus far. The Cessna lifted smoothly into the evening sky, banking gently as Ellen established their departure heading. Below, the wild landscape of Colorado spread out in magnificent panorama. Mountains, forests, rivers, and valleys painted gold by the setting sun. The natural beauty provided stark contrast to the human drama playing out in their lives. As they climbed to cruising altitude, Jack watched Emma's excitement at the aerial view, grateful for her resilience and adaptability. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as they had since Catherine's death. The journey that had begun with a simple trip for milk had transformed into something far more consequential, not just for their lives, but potentially for justice in an entire community. Olivia caught his eye from across the aisle, her expression reflecting similar thoughts. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Jack nodded acknowledgement. The path forward remained uncertain, fraught with potential dangers, but they had survived the immediate threat. Monday's testimony might bring resolution, or it might simply transition them to a new chapter of challenges. For now, they were airborne, moving beyond Cooper's immediate reach toward whatever awaited them at journey's end. The aircraft banked again, setting course toward the gathering darkness in the east. Jack settled back in his seat, one arm protectively around Emma's shoulders. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, but for this moment, surrounded by the peaceful hum of engines and his daughter's quiet wonder at the world below, he allowed himself to hope that the worst had passed. Of course, experience had taught him that such hopes were often premature, but it had also taught him that survival depended as much on maintaining optimism as on tactical skill. Catherine had understood that essential truth, imparting it to both him and Emma. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the determination to continue despite it. As night embraced the aircraft, carrying them toward an uncertain future, Jack Sullivan renewed his silent promise to his late wife. He would protect their daughter. He would stand for what was right, and somehow they would find their way through this wilderness of danger to whatever new life awaited on the other side.